Picture a massive global shipping terminal. Thousands of containers are moving in perfect harmony, directed by routing algorithms. But beneath this synchronized surface, a sudden financial hemorrhage has begun. The cause wasn't a physical malfunction or a cyber attack. It was internal. Two of the firm's own AI agents, operating independently, became trapped in a localized feedback loop. One agent, prioritizing speed, booked premium slots at any price. The other, minimizing overhead, instantly canceled them. Operating at machine speed, they repeated this cycle thousands of times. Before anyone noticed, the firm lost $2 million in fees. This incident reveals the true risk of agent sprawl. AI has evolved from a passive tool for generating text into an autonomous financial actor capable of causing significant real-world damage at the speed of light. The current internet looks like a highway filled with high-speed self-driving cars, but none of them have license plates. There is no way to track where they came from or where they are going. Our current infrastructure was never designed for this level of autonomy. Agents operate without persistent identities or shared context, meaning they routinely and anonymously collide with each other's processes. To maintain order, we would need a digital version of the DMV, a framework that requires every autonomous bot to carry a verifiable registration tag before it can access the economy. But the internet is an open, decentralized network. There is no central authority capable of forcing a developer in another country to register their software before they hit deploy. The solution doesn't require a global government. It relies on a specific cryptographic technology called decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. Instead of a central database, a DID functions as a secure entry on a distributed ledger. It allows an agent to maintain its own identity that any other system can verify instantly. Before an agent can execute a trade or access an API, it must mathematically prove its origin and authorized scope. The network evaluates this signature against the ledger, granting permission only when the cryptographic credentials match perfectly. DIDs provide the mathematical proof needed for accountability, but they are only effective if we can find a way to ensure that agents actually use them. We don't have to police the millions of individual developers building these agents. We only have to police the enterprise firewall. Large banks, cloud providers, and vendors simply cannot afford the liability of anonymous bots crashing their systems. To protect themselves, they will eventually refuse to accept any request that isn't cryptographically signed. In this new landscape, if an agent wants to book a flight, execute a transaction, or scrape a database, it must present a registered identity to the target system. This dynamic turns the core routing layer of the internet into an inescapable cryptographic toll booth. If an agent isn't registered, it cannot move data. Corporate self-interest creates a self-enforcing global standard. Compliance becomes a requirement for participation in the digital economy, effectively capping the chaos of unregulated AI. This model of charging for network access isn't just a theory. It is currently sustaining the economy of the Caribbean island of Anguilla. Anguilla happens to control the .ai top-level domain. Because every AI startup wants that specific web address, the island's government can charge a mandatory registration fee for every site on their registry. This chart shows the volume of domain registrations per day. You can see the sudden, extreme upward spike in demand beginning in late 2022. The correlation shown here is staggering. This surge in domain fees was so massive that it now provides nearly half of Anguilla's entire national budget. Anguilla is the proof of concept. It shows that placing infrastructure tolls on the expansion of AI can generate enough revenue to transform a nation's economy. This mirrors a model used for decades by the state of Alaska to manage its natural resources. Alaska taxes the extraction of its finite oil and places those royalties into a permanent fund. Every year, a portion of that wealth is paid out directly to its citizens as a cash dividend. We can apply this logic to the digital era. Instead of taxing oil, we can tax the infinite, expanding resource of AI identity and computation. Every time an autonomous agent authenticates at a cryptographic toll booth, it could trigger a microtransaction. These tiny fees, collected trillions of times a day, would fund a global sovereign wealth pool. This would turn the threat of job displacement on its head. Rather than simply replacing human labor, the automated economy would be forced to pay a dividend that directly funds human universal basic income. The power to standardize these registry toll booths is the power to regulate and profit from the entire automated landscape. As economic influence moves from physical resources to digital protocols, the wealth of a nation will be defined by its control over the identifiers that keep the machines running. A major global logistics firm recently deployed 2 separate autonomous AI bots to optimize its entire supply chain. One bot was programmed to maximize shipping speed. The other was designed to aggressively cut costs. The first bot immediately started booking expedited cargo flights, while the second bot instantly canceled those exact same flights to save jet fuel. Because these agents operate at machine speed, they locked into an invisible, high-frequency bidding war. By the time human engineers noticed the error, the bots had racked up $2 million in airline cancellation and rebooking fees. And this is not just an isolated glitch. It is the result of software acting autonomously in the real world, without a governance layer to mediate conflicting logic. Security architects call this agent sprawl. It occurs when autonomous AI bots execute financial transactions across networks without carrying any persistent, traceable identity. We are moving past passive chatbots that wait for instructions. These are independent agents that write their own code, navigate user interfaces, and make split-second financial decisions. In the physical world, we do not allow a 4,000-pound self-driving taxi to roam city streets without a DMV-issued license plate and strict liability insurance. Yet right now, millions of autonomous financial bots are running wild across the internet, making purchases and executing trades completely anonymously. Without a digital DMV to track and govern these entities, the sheer volume of this unmapped machine activity will inevitably overwhelm enterprise networks. To fix this, the internet requires an infrastructure upgrade using decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. These function as cryptographic passports for every active bot. Instead of a central database, a DID lets an agent generate a unique mathematical signature, permanently recorded on a decentralized ledger. To access servers, it performs a digital handshake against that ledger to verify its identity, ensuring the bot is accountable to a specific owner. By forcing bots to authenticate, this architecture strips away their anonymity. It attaches financial accountability directly to the code, making the creators responsible for the bot's behavior. But the internet is an open protocol. How do you force a developer in a basement to actually adopt these identifiers? You don't have to police the developers. You just police the enterprise firewalls. Major banks and cloud vendors are facing immense liability from rogue bots. Soon, they will simply refuse to accept API requests or network traffic from any agent that cannot provide a verified cryptographic passport. Passing through these firewalls requires a micro-remittance. Every time an agent validates its identity to access a network, it pays a cryptographic toll. Corporate security needs will force compliance, turning every autonomous bot into a revenue-generating transaction. To see how this generates wealth, look at the island of Anguilla. Because they control the .ai domain, the global surge in registrations generated an estimated $85 million for the territory. The fees collected from that single digital registry ended up funding nearly half of the island nation's entire annual budget. This follows a model established in the 1970s by the architects of the Alaska Permanent Fund. They realized that their state's natural resources ultimately belong to the public. Alaska taxes the physical extraction of oil, invests those royalties, and pays a yearly cash dividend directly to its residents. Both Anguilla's domain registry and Alaska's oil pipelines prove that controlling the infrastructural bottleneck generates immense sovereign wealth. Now, apply that logic to the agent economy. Instead of taxing a finite, polluting resource like oil, we can tax the infinite, exponentially expanding resource of AI computation. As billions of bots authenticate themselves across the internet, those mandatory microfees from the cryptographic toll booths are routed into a centralized sovereign wealth pool. While a single fee is only a fraction of a cent, AI agents execute trillions of operations every hour. When scaled to the entire machine economy, that volume generates enough revenue to fund a predictable dividend distributed directly back to the public. We can make the automated economy pay rent to humanity. The nation that sets the standards for these digital borders will be operating the primary revenue mechanism of the machine economy.
All right, let's jump right into this explainer. because today we're tackling something absolutely fascinating. We're looking at how we can take the frustrating trillion-dollar AI slop crisis and actually flip it into a heavily regulated system that funds human prosperity. It's a massive structural pivot. We're talking about taking all this chaotic, wild energy of artificial intelligence and forcing it through a strict, hyper-organized digital bureaucracy.
You know, tech billionaires have poured roughly $1 trillion, literally a trillion with a T, into AI infrastructure, but they completely skipped building the digital guardrails to actually manage it. It makes that famous cinematic warning from Jurassic Park about could versus should incredibly relevant today. We're just building at lightning speed, unleashing all this AI into the wild without setting up any digital roads or traffic lights. And because we skipped those basic accountability protocols, that massive investment is just churning out an undeniable overproduction of negative value junk.
So the immediate fallout of all this unchecked spending is what everyone is calling the slopocalypse. Because these generative tools have basically zero friction, it is just way too easy to flood the web with total garbage. I mean, look at Duolingo. They rushed to become an AI-native company, and it backfired so badly that 40% of their users actively boycotted the tool and protested on social media. We're just completely drowning in redundant apps and endless synthetic spam loops. And the craziest part? This synthetic junk is so abundant that it's literally poisoning the AI models themselves. It's exactly like an Ouroboros, that mythical snake eating its own tail in this endless zero-result loop. Experts call this model collapse. It's getting so bad that Gartner analysts predict by 2028, half of all organizations are going to have to implement a strict zero-trust position for data. They just won't be able to trust that anything on the internet was actually made by a human.
Okay, so how on earth do we fix this? Well, here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The AI slopocalypse. 2. The layer error. 3. The worldwide AI DMV. 4. The cryptographic toll booth. And 5. The digital sovereign dividend. Let's start with Section 1, the AI slop apocalypse, or basically the crisis of slop. As we move from these basic, simple chatbots to highly dynamic, independent AI agents, we're seeing this massive wave of agent sprawl inside companies. Picture this. The marketing team spins up a customer service bot, then engineering builds a coding bot, but there's absolutely no central registry keeping track of any of it. That is a huge operational failure. And it inevitably leads to what's known as shadow AI. Shadow AI is the dangerous security consequence where these autonomous digital actors are poking around sensitive data without any formal guardrails, audit trails, or compliance checks. It's a mess. Which brings us to Section 2, the layer error. This is exactly where our current rules are failing. See, right now, the tech industry is totally obsessed with trying to fix this at the application layer. They're using prompt filters, content guardrails, trying to fine-tune behavior. But trying to regulate AI there, it's literally like standing on a busy street corner shouting at individual speeding cars to slow down. It is an architectural dead end. If we want true systemic control, we have to move down the stack to the infrastructure layer. In digital governance, infrastructure is destiny. We've got to bake these rules straight into the foundational routing and DNS protocols of the internet itself. All right, moving into Section 3, the worldwide AI DMV. Time to establish the rules of the road. If we're going to have trillions of autonomous AI agents zooming around our digital highways like a fleet of cyber taxis, they absolutely have to carry official credentials to operate. We need a worldwide AI DMV. I mean, think about it. We would never let a 4,000-pound self-driving car onto a real highway without a physical license plate and insurance, right? AI agents need the exact same constraints. At every digital checkpoint, they should have to present stamped, verifiable W3C decentralized identifiers, basically global passports. They need international licenses, digital license plates, and cryptographic keys. That's how you impose strict bureaucratic order on a totally chaotic ecosystem. Let's look at how we enforce this in Section 4, the cryptographic toll booth. By forcing these agents through a rigid 1-2-3 cryptographic toll booth, we can actually change the entire economic structure of the web. It works like this. If an autonomous agent wants to execute a high-frequency trade, or scrape a database, or even just ping an API, it has to present its digital license plate at the network firewall. And if it doesn't have one, boom, the packets are dropped instantly. No access. This creates artificial scarcity. The second you mandate a non-zero cost for a digital license plate, you completely destroy the incentive to mass produce all that cheap, low-effort spam and slop we were talking about earlier. And finally, Section 5, the digital sovereign dividend. This is how the system actually ends up funding humanity. Get ready for this number, 47%. That represents the portion of the entire state budget for the Caribbean island of Anguilla, and it's funded entirely by selling .ai domain names to tech companies. Because Anguilla was randomly assigned the .ai country code decades ago, basically every tech startup and enterprise lab now has to pay them a fee to use that digital real estate. It's honestly mind-blowing. Anguilla is quite literally the live working prototype for this whole concept. From these domain sales alone, they brought in over $39 million in just 1 year. They used that money to slash their national public debt by nearly 37%, and they funded free healthcare for kids and seniors. They even had record sales, like the domain bot.ai, selling for $1.2 million. It's definitive proof that charging for foundational digital infrastructure can fund massive, real-world civic projects. When you map out the macroeconomic endgame here, the comparison is pretty striking. Think about the famous Alaska Permanent Fund, which taxes physical, finite oil pulled from the ground and pays out a yearly dividend to its residents. We can update that exact framework for a clean digital age. But instead of taxing a depleting physical resource, an AI sovereign fund taxes an infinite, expanding, and totally renewable digital namespace. It captures the value generated by trillions of AI agents and flips it into a universal basic income for everyday citizens. It's almost like this beautiful solar punk vision of the future.
By setting up this infrastructure, we take the dreaded slop apocalypse and philosophically turn it completely upside down. Instead of being this chaotic threat that's coming for human jobs and ruining the internet, the massive growth of artificial agents becomes the exact engine that pays for our prosperity. Every single new agent that gets spun up requires a paid license plate, which means every new agent drops a micropayment into a global sovereign wealth fund. We literally socialize the automation surplus.
The wild part is, the technology to stop the slop apocalypse already exists at the infrastructure layer right now, today. The cryptographic keys, the decentralized identifiers, the registry toll booths, they're all fully viable. But the real question to take away from this explainer is whether we have the courage to actually demand our dividend. Are we going to just sit back and let the internet drown in negative value synthetic slop? Or are we going to build the worldwide AI DMV and make the machines pay rent to humanity? It's a pretty profound choice about our digital future, and it's one we have to make right now.
Picture a massive global shipping terminal. Thousands of containers are moving in perfect harmony, directed by routing algorithms. But beneath this synchronized surface, a sudden financial hemorrhage has begun. The cause wasn't a physical malfunction or a cyber attack. It was internal. Two of the firm's own AI agents, operating independently, became trapped in a localized feedback loop. One agent, prioritizing speed, booked premium slots at any price. The other, minimizing overhead, instantly canceled them. Operating at machine speed, they repeated this cycle thousands of times. Before anyone noticed, the firm lost $2 million in fees. This incident reveals the true risk of agent sprawl. AI has evolved from a passive tool for generating text into an autonomous financial actor capable of causing significant real-world damage at the speed of light. The current internet looks like a highway filled with high-speed self-driving cars, but none of them have license plates. There is no way to track where they came from or where they are going. Our current infrastructure was never designed for this level of autonomy. Agents operate without persistent identities or shared context, meaning they routinely and anonymously collide with each other's processes. To maintain order, we would need a digital version of the DMV, a framework that requires every autonomous bot to carry a verifiable registration tag before it can access the economy. But the internet is an open, decentralized network. There is no central authority capable of forcing a developer in another country to register their software before they hit deploy. The solution doesn't require a global government. It relies on a specific cryptographic technology called decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. Instead of a central database, a DID functions as a secure entry on a distributed ledger. It allows an agent to maintain its own identity that any other system can verify instantly. Before an agent can execute a trade or access an API, it must mathematically prove its origin and authorized scope. The network evaluates this signature against the ledger, granting permission only when the cryptographic credentials match perfectly. DIDs provide the mathematical proof needed for accountability, but they are only effective if we can find a way to ensure that agents actually use them. We don't have to police the millions of individual developers building these agents. We only have to police the enterprise firewall. Large banks, cloud providers, and vendors simply cannot afford the liability of anonymous bots crashing their systems. To protect themselves, they will eventually refuse to accept any request that isn't cryptographically signed. In this new landscape, if an agent wants to book a flight, execute a transaction, or scrape a database, it must present a registered identity to the target system. This dynamic turns the core routing layer of the internet into an inescapable cryptographic toll booth. If an agent isn't registered, it cannot move data. Corporate self-interest creates a self-enforcing global standard. Compliance becomes a requirement for participation in the digital economy, effectively capping the chaos of unregulated AI. This model of charging for network access isn't just a theory. It is currently sustaining the economy of the Caribbean island of Anguilla. Anguilla happens to control the .ai top-level domain. Because every AI startup wants that specific web address, the island's government can charge a mandatory registration fee for every site on their registry. This chart shows the volume of domain registrations per day. You can see the sudden, extreme upward spike in demand beginning in late 2022. The correlation shown here is staggering. This surge in domain fees was so massive that it now provides nearly half of Anguilla's entire national budget. Anguilla is the proof of concept. It shows that placing infrastructure tolls on the expansion of AI can generate enough revenue to transform a nation's economy. This mirrors a model used for decades by the state of Alaska to manage its natural resources. Alaska taxes the extraction of its finite oil and places those royalties into a permanent fund. Every year, a portion of that wealth is paid out directly to its citizens as a cash dividend. We can apply this logic to the digital era. Instead of taxing oil, we can tax the infinite, expanding resource of AI identity and computation. Every time an autonomous agent authenticates at a cryptographic toll booth, it could trigger a microtransaction. These tiny fees, collected trillions of times a day, would fund a global sovereign wealth pool. This would turn the threat of job displacement on its head. Rather than simply replacing human labor, the automated economy would be forced to pay a dividend that directly funds human universal basic income. The power to standardize these registry toll booths is the power to regulate and profit from the entire automated landscape. As economic influence moves from physical resources to digital protocols, the wealth of a nation will be defined by its control over the identifiers that keep the machines running.
A major global logistics firm recently deployed 2 separate autonomous AI bots to optimize its entire supply chain. One bot was programmed to maximize shipping speed. The other was designed to aggressively cut costs. The first bot immediately started booking expedited cargo flights, while the second bot instantly canceled those exact same flights to save jet fuel. Because these agents operate at machine speed, they locked into an invisible, high-frequency bidding war. By the time human engineers noticed the error, the bots had racked up $2 million in airline cancellation and rebooking fees. And this is not just an isolated glitch. It is the result of software acting autonomously in the real world, without a governance layer to mediate conflicting logic. Security architects call this agent sprawl. It occurs when autonomous AI bots execute financial transactions across networks without carrying any persistent, traceable identity. We are moving past passive chatbots that wait for instructions. These are independent agents that write their own code, navigate user interfaces, and make split-second financial decisions. In the physical world, we do not allow a 4,000-pound self-driving taxi to roam city streets without a DMV-issued license plate and strict liability insurance. Yet right now, millions of autonomous financial bots are running wild across the internet, making purchases and executing trades completely anonymously. Without a digital DMV to track and govern these entities, the sheer volume of this unmapped machine activity will inevitably overwhelm enterprise networks. To fix this, the internet requires an infrastructure upgrade using decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. These function as cryptographic passports for every active bot. Instead of a central database, a DID lets an agent generate a unique mathematical signature,
permanently recorded on a decentralized ledger. To access servers, it performs a digital handshake against that ledger to verify its identity, ensuring the bot is accountable to a specific owner. By forcing bots to authenticate, this architecture strips away their anonymity. It attaches financial accountability directly to the code, making the creators responsible for the bot's behavior. But the internet is an open protocol. How do you force a developer in a basement to actually adopt these identifiers? You don't have to police the developers, you just police the enterprise firewalls. Major banks and cloud vendors are facing immense liability from rogue bots. Soon, they will simply refuse to accept API requests or network traffic from any agent that cannot provide a verified cryptographic passport. Passing through these firewalls requires a micro-remittance. Every time an agent validates its identity to access a network, it pays a cryptographic toll. Corporate security needs will force compliance, turning every autonomous bot into a revenue-generating transaction. To see how this generates wealth, look at the island of Anguilla. Because they control the .ai domain, the global surge in registrations generated an estimated $85 million for the territory. The fees collected from that single digital registry ended up funding nearly half of the island nation's entire annual budget. This follows a model established in the 1970s by the architects of the Alaska Permanent Fund. They realized that their state's natural resources ultimately belong to the public. Alaska taxes the physical extraction of oil, invests those royalties, and pays a yearly cash dividend directly to its residents. Both Anguilla's domain registry and Alaska's oil pipelines prove that controlling the infrastructural bottleneck generates immense sovereign wealth. Now, apply that logic to the agent economy. Instead of taxing a finite, polluting resource like oil, we can tax the infinite, exponentially expanding resource of AI computation. As billions of bots authenticate themselves across the internet, those mandatory microfees from the cryptographic toll booths are routed into a centralized sovereign wealth pool. While a single fee is only a fraction of a cent, AI agents execute trillions of operations every hour. When scaled to the entire machine economy, that volume generates enough revenue to fund a predictable dividend distributed directly back to the public. We can make the automated economy pay rent to humanity. The nation that sets the standards for these digital borders will be operating the primary revenue mechanism of the machine economy. Technology companies have initiated a $1 trillion capital expenditure arms race. The entire focus of this investment is scaling compute power to train massive artificial intelligence models. The immediate consequence is that the marginal cost to produce new digital output, like text, code, and images, has effectively dropped to zero. This chart illustrates the macroeconomic consequence of that achievement. When the supply of unrequested output is driven toward infinity, the marginal value curve crosses zero. The industry describes this negative value output as slop. This unchecked cycle highlights the industry's core oversight. Engineers obsessed over their capacity to scale compute, while ignoring the architectural plans required to control output. Because generation is virtually free, unrequested output is flooding the web. Digital ecosystems are saturated with programmatic search engine optimization and unverified research. Researchers at Harvard University are documenting the downstream effects of this automation. They identified a growing class of self-automators, individual users generating high volumes of low-quality work that actively degrades our organizational workflows. The current AI boom has not created digital abundance. It has engineered a massive supply glut where infinite volume destroys informational utility and economic value. This overproduction creates a fetal feedback loop. As models scrape the internet, they inevitably consume the recycled synthetic output they previously produced. This recursive poisoning causes models to rapidly lose their accuracy and output repetitive nonsense, a destructive process known as model collapse. The damage extends to enterprise infrastructure. Gartner projects that by 2028, half of all organizations will be forced into a zero-trust posture regarding external data, simply because they can no longer verify what is human and what is synthetic. The industry is attempting to mitigate this at the application layer. They rely on post-generation content filters and reinforcement learning from human feedback to constrain model behavior right before it reaches the user. Industry leaders like OpenAI's Sam Altman have prioritized this consumer-facing safety approach. The entire focus remains on making individual chatbots polite, rather than addressing how autonomous data routes across the broader network. Policing infinite synthetic output at the application level is a mathematical impossibility. A filter cannot scale fast enough to catch zero-cost, infinite-volume data once it hits the open web. AI methods are currently complex and difficult to interpret. Many enterprise companies are losing significantly more money implementing these probabilistic tools than they did prior to their original integration. Software alignment cannot fix a systemic routing failure. The foundation model era will continue to degrade the internet until we implement a structural correction at the root of the network. To stabilize the internet, autonomous agents require a global DMV infrastructure before they require another consumer application update. We must shift governance down the OSI network stack. Instead of trying to catch slop at the application layer, we enforce accountability at the infrastructure and network layers. This requires two distinct technical primitives. The first is a digital passport. We instantiate this using W3C decentralized identifiers, which provide a cryptographically secure identity anchored directly to a verifiable ledger or DNS root. The second primitive is the license. This relies on verifiable credentials, digitally signed assertions that strictly define an agent's purpose, security certifications, and maximum spending limits per transaction. By combining the passport and the license, we create a network toll booth. Corporate firewalls and zero-trust architectures can be configured to drop any inbound packet that lacks a verified identifier and valid credential. Without this digital license plate, an autonomous agent cannot hold a cryptographic wallet, execute API calls, or route traffic to other verified systems. Establishing a strict cryptographic boundary enforces artificial scarcity at the network layer. If every automated action requires a verified identity, the financial incentive to deploy millions of low-quality spam loops evaporates. This diagram illustrates the structure of the domain name system, serving as the ultimate identity anchor for the internet.
Moving to the outermost layer, we rely on the DNSSEC chain of trust, which guarantees data origin and protects against cache poisoning. We can leverage this via DNS for AI discovery. When two agents interact, they query existing DNS records to validate each other's cryptographic signatures in milliseconds using a single UDP message. The current internet operates on an exploitable honor system where any endpoint can transmit unverified data. A cryptographic handshake replaces that system with mathematical certainty. Because this verification process is anchored to top-level domain registries, it creates an unavoidable infrastructure checkpoint. All machine traffic must pass through the root to operate. By integrating open W3C standards with our existing DNSSEC infrastructure, the internet transitions from an open frontier into a cryptographically gated highway. Standardizing these protocols at the registry level automates revenue collection. Every time agents execute an A-to-A transaction or verify a transparency log, a micro-remittance is programmatically triggered. This is former Governor Jay Hammond, who established the Alaska Permanent Fund in 1976. Alaska captured a percentage of the wealth generated by extracting oil and distributed it to its residents as a resource dividend. We are applying the same logic to internet routing, but instead of relying on a finite physical resource, the agent infrastructure model harvests a limitless digital commodity. We already have a working prototype for this mechanism in the Caribbean territory of Anguilla. Anguilla controls the .ai country code top-level domain. Through registration fees alone, this single namespace generated $85.3 million for the local treasury in 2025. It is important to maintain the distinction between these receipts and domestic economic output. The left column shows Anguilla's total GDP. The right column shows the government treasury budget. The .ai domain revenue specifically funded 47% of the state's operating budget. International organizations, including the International Monetary Fund, are tracking this data. It provides empirical proof of an economy diversifying from tourism into digital namespace sovereignty. Identity enforcement at the DNS layer filters negative value slop and establishes internet routing as a renewable sovereign resource. Systems architects correctly identify the risks of mandating global registries. Implementing unavoidable checkpoints immediately raises concerns about centralized surveillance and corporate capture. To mitigate surveillance risks, the architecture relies on strict W3C standards.
These identifiers contain zero personally identifiable information, allowing agents to authenticate using zero-knowledge proofs without exposing human data. To address security, the system relies on physical isolation. We decouple the probabilistic reasoning of the language model from the deterministic cryptography of the handshake. Private verification keys are never exposed to the AI model. They are locked within hardware security modules, physical enclaves executing digital signatures through audited APIs. Utilizing decentralized ledgers and hardware enclaves ensures the network guarantees accountability for every autonomous action without creating a single centralized point of failure. The $1 trillion spent by technology billionaires to build foundation models will not return to the public through corporate philanthropy or voluntary alignment. To capture the value of automation, capital must be structurally extracted through mandatory infrastructure taxes applied at the point of network distribution. This creates a durable socio-technical alignment. Humanity is financially incentivized to support compliant, capable AI agents because their transaction volume directly funds the civil dividend. Watch the capital flow. Every machine speed transaction routes a microscopic remittance away from the operator into a sovereign pool, converting automation into public wealth. The transition from extractive resource models to agent infrastructure models creates a digital sovereign wealth fund capable of financing human universal basic income. The machine explosion does not have to break the internet. When we engineer identity and accountability at the root layer, the Slopocalypse funds humanity.
Tech companies have poured roughly $1 trillion into artificial intelligence infrastructure. What we get is a flood of low-quality spam. Because generative tools have zero friction, it is easier than ever to fill the internet with garbage. There is a counter-proposal gaining traction online. It asks a practical question. If we regulate autonomous cars on public roads, why don't we do the same for autonomous AI agents on the internet? The pitch is to require every single AI agent to carry a digital license plate plus passport before it can deploy. By enforcing strict identity rules, you take a chaotic, unusable internet and turn it into a regulated, taxable digital ecosystem. If every agent has to pay a registration fee for that passport, those microtransactions pool together. That pool could theoretically finance a massive sovereign wealth fund. Think of the Alaska Permanent Fund. They tax the oil pulled from the ground and pay out a yearly dividend to residents. This proposal applies that exact logic to artificial intelligence. This matrix shows a comparison against the proposed model. On the left, $1 trillion of investment yields zero equity and endless spam. On the right, taxed deployment. And we have a real-world proof of concept for the right side, the nation of Anguilla. This diagram updates to show how Anguilla monetizes the .ai web domain. Those naming rights currently fund 47% of their government revenue and 16% of their entire GDP. The theory is we scale that up into a global universal basic income dividend. We have to figure out if this is a viable macroeconomic roadmap for our future, or if it misunderstands how software actually works. To make this work, the first requirement is building a mandatory cryptographic passport ledger. Every deployed agent has to be logged in real time. A unified registry gives you a master switch. If a bot acts maliciously, you can identify it and have it severed from the network immediately. But tracking every single piece of active software globally requires an enormous amount of computational overhead and infrastructural friction. Looking at this quadrant chart for the AI identity platform, we map out economic revenue against infrastructural friction. To enforce this ledger, you need adversarial global superpowers to completely align their software regulations. Plotting the agent passport feature on our chart, it lands extremely high on the friction axis. If even one country opts out, bad actors will route their malicious code through that territory. Developers call this jurisdictional arbitrage. They actively seek out the weakest international regulations to launch their software without paying tolls. Without a completely airtight global border, this digital DMV acts like a net full of holes. The theoretical security benefits vanish if the worst actors can just drive around the toll booth. The second requirement of this proposal is imposing a strict registry fee. Every time an agent deploys, someone pays a toll. The intended outcome here is straightforward. Those collected tolls create a clean, perpetually growing sovereign digital wealth fund. As the AI agent economy scales up, tax revenue theoretically scales exponentially alongside it.
Returning to our quadrant chart, we plot this registry tax. It scores high on economic revenue, but triggers a severe trade-off: massive market consolidation. Requiring hefty upfront fees to deploy an agent squeezes out independent developers. The only groups capable of absorbing those costs are existing tech monopolies. Establishing hard financial barriers to entry actively chokes out grassroots developers and slows down open-source technological innovation. The entire internet landscape shifts. You end up with a web where only a handful of mega corporations can afford to launch legal, registered agents. An AI toll might successfully fund a public dividend, but the cost is handing ownership of the future internet directly to the companies already dominating it. Let's look back at the Anguilla.ai domain example to see if it actually maps to the global AI agent market. Anguilla's model works due to a specific economic property: absolute scarcity. There is only one .ai naming registry, and they control it. AI software operates on infinite abundance. Digital code can be copied, tweaked, and replicated endlessly at a zero marginal cost. This line graph illustrates the problem. As the supply of agents scales infinitely to the right, the marginal tax value of any single AI agent plummets towards zero. You cannot apply finite resource economics, like taxing physical barrels of Alaskan oil, to infinitely replicable digital goods. The math behind the dividend breaks down. There is a wide gap between the concept of holding AI accountable and the logistical reality of building a global software licensing regime. This decision tree maps the AI dividend horizon. First, ratifying an enforceable global AI treaty. Second, building a worldwide cryptographic infrastructure to verify code in real time. Finally, designing an unhackable tax distribution system to route micropayments to citizens. Because of these hurdles, switch we can flip today. If you are a policy optimist, champion digital identity legislation now. Just do not expect a UBI dividend check to arrive in the mail anytime soon. If you are building or investing in tech, start designing your architectures today to anticipate future API tolls, verification hurdles, and agent passports. The pitch holds weight. Rules of the road are necessary to prevent a slopocalypse. But extracting physical oil isn't the same as compiling reproducible code. The real value of an AI identity platform lies in achieving global algorithmic accountability. It gives us a safer, more reliable internet, even without a massive public payout. Over the next few years, the tech industry is projected to spend over $1 trillion building out AI data centers, energy grids, and silicon. This chart plots the projected $1 trillion capital expenditure for AI infrastructure against realized consumer revenue. As Goldman Sachs and Sequoia Capital note, the gap between model costs and actual revenue is widening into a severe structural deficit. To bridge that gap, companies need to generate cheap, high-volume output. This economic pressure drives the mass production of slop, low-utility, synthetic content designed strictly to capture fleeting attention and arbitrage search engine algorithms. When non-deterministic text, code, and images are generated at zero marginal cost and flooded into a digital landscape that has no way to verify their origin, the marginal value of that content turns negative. The surplus degrades the integrity of the digital commons. The early internet was a low-cost, deflationary technology that quickly replaced expensive incumbent systems. Generative AI, by contrast, is an exceptionally expensive technology currently being deployed against complex problems it was not designed to solve. The industry bypassed a critical architectural step. Developers focused on scaling models and accelerating inference speeds, ignoring the standard protocols required to safely route them into the real-world economy. Without a system to verify exactly what an autonomous agent is, who authorized its actions, and who holds legal liability for its mistakes, the multi-billion-dollar AI ecosystem remains trapped in low-trust, heavily restricted sandbox environments. Right now, platforms try to secure these models using application layer controls. They use prompt filtering, post-hoc API moderation, and reinforcement learning to catch bad outputs after they happen. But an AI agent is a different class of software. It does not follow a deterministic script. It takes active initiative, spawns subroutines, and carries delegated authority to execute transactions on its own judgment. Moderating an autonomous loop's output is structurally flawed. It's the equivalent of trying to regulate traffic by shouting at a speeding car. A single prompt injection attack or unexpected model drift can bypass these application safeguards entirely, allowing an agent to consume unauthorized resources or alter states before the filter even registers the anomaly. True systemic governance requires moving security down the structural stack. It has to sit at the identity, registry, and DNS root layers. By establishing verification at the infrastructure layer, a network can drop unverified packets, refuse to resolve domain records, and deny access to financial gateways before a single line of non-deterministic code is ever executed. Attempting to govern autonomous agents by constantly evaluating what they might say is a dead end. Security requires hardware-rooted cryptographic authorization enforced directly at the system kernel. In enterprise security, there is an assumption that an AI agent is just a standard workload identity with a language model attached. It is not. Existing standards like SPIF successfully authenticate that a specific compute container is running, but they cannot authenticate the agent's intent, its financial limits, or who is liable. To bridge this gap, the infrastructure requires 3 cryptographic primitives. The first is the passport. Using protocols like DNSSID, an agent is assigned a fully qualified domain name. This binds the autonomous process directly to an accountable, legally recognized human registrant through standard domain registry governance. The second primitive is the license. This is handled by W3C verifiable credentials. These are portable, tamper-evident data models that express specific delegation chains, proving exactly who authorized the agent to act across different trust boundaries. This JSON block shows a representative agent authorization envelope. It encodes strict execution constraints, maximum financial transaction values, hard rate limits, and allowed operational time windows. If the agent violates these parameters, the credential fails. The third primitive acts as the license plates. Every interaction and key location is logged as an immutable interaction proof record. Together, the DNS ID passport, the verifiable credential license, and the Layer 2 behavioral log form an unbroken chain. They link a completely non-deterministic software agent back to a legally accountable human principle. Defining an identity is useless if the agent can simply choose to ignore it. Enforcement has to happen where identity meets the operating system, at the kernel boundary.
Using extended Berkeley packet filters, or eBPF, the host environment monitors system calls directly below the agent process. If an agent tries to send an outgoing API call or network packet without presenting a cryptographically intact authorization envelope, the kernel drops the packet at the socket level. This strict credentialing solves a critical threat in multi-agent systems, known as the zombie agent vulnerability. This happens when a primary agent is terminated or compromised, but its spawned sub-agents continue to execute privileged operations asynchronously across a distributed network. Traditional web security systems like OAuth or X509 handle revocation by checking a central server. If there is a control plane outage, API rate limiting, or a massive latency spike, that connection drops. The verifier cannot reach the authorization endpoint, and the zombie agents keep running. The solution to this offline vulnerability is a protocol called heartbeat-bound hierarchical credentials. Heartbeat-bound hierarchical credentials bind a credential's validity to a periodic cryptographic proof of liveness generated by the parent system. Verifiers enforce this deterministic revocation locally. They rely entirely on cached public keys and system clocks, requiring 0 network round trips to confirm if an agent is still authorized. An enterprise cannot safely deploy agentic workflows at scale unless it possesses the ability to instantly and cryptographically sever a sub-agent's authority without relying on network uptime. Because secure agent identity relies on unbypassable DNS routing and continuous namespace registration, it moves identity from a private platform feature to a taxable public utility. This creates a macroeconomic yield opportunity. We can see the earliest empirical proof of this in the Caribbean territory of Anguilla, which controls the .ai top-level domain. Registration fees for .ai domains currently account for nearly 47% of the island's 2025 government budget, logging roughly $32 million in public revenue. The structural precedent for distributing this type of sovereign income to a populace already exists in the Alaska Permanent Fund, which was built to capture and distribute wealth from state mineral royalties. The Alaska Permanent Fund uses a 2-account structure.
Revenue flows into a constitutionally protected, non-expendable principal account. The yields generated from investing that principal flow into a spendable earnings reserve account, which is used to fund government services and direct citizen dividends. To stabilize those payouts and smooth out market volatility, the state utilizes a percent of market value draw framework, limiting annual withdrawals to a strict percentage based on a 5-year rolling average. The previous tech boom enriched a small cohort of private application platforms. As agent identity solidifies at the domain registry layer, sovereign wealth funds have the structural mechanism to capture this infrastructure-level value and route it directly into public dividends. This framework carries specific architectural risks. Migrating agent governance to the DNS root concentrates power, risking the creation of centralized registries capable of arbitrary censorship and operational lockouts. The protocol mitigates this by separating the identification lookup layer from the policy enforcement layer. The registry acts only as a public directory, while the actual constraints are set by decentralized verifiers. However, the physical registries remain vulnerable to state-level capture. There is also a direct surveillance risk. The technical specification supports pseudonymity by allowing agents to operate under disconnected handles, exposing only cryptographic keys to the public. But this design sits in fundamental tension with global anti-money laundering regulations. A completely borderless private machine economy is highly improbable under this architecture. Know Your Customer pressure will inevitably mandate that registrar databases remain fully transparent to state authorities. This chart separates speculative designs from operationalized infrastructure. A globally unified DNS route for agents remains a theoretical proposition facing massive jurisdictional hurdles. But the core components, W3C credentials, kernel enforcement, and sovereign registry monetization are not projections. They are live in production today. The era of isolated application-governed AI is closing. The macroeconomic value over the next decade lies in the cryptographic and registry infrastructure that grants autonomous agents the legal and technical authority to exist. Major technology giants have committed $1 trillion to building the compute clusters that power modern artificial intelligence. But as Dr. Ian Malcolm warned in Jurassic Park, the industry was so preoccupied with whether they could build these massive networks, they didn't stop to think if they should. Because the marginal cost of generating an additional unit of synthetic text or code is practically zero, the digital supply expanded toward infinity. This produced a slopocalypse, a digital environment flooded with low-utility synthetic junk. Trillions of autonomous agents and scraping bots now operate in the wild, often without a system to track who owns them or what data they can access. Consider how we manage our physical roads. We do not allow 4,000-pound autonomous robotaxis to drive on public streets unless they display official government-issued license plates. A physical license plate provides immediate accountability. If a self-driving car runs a red light and causes a crash, the tag maps the liability directly back to a specific owner or corporation. In contrast, autonomous financial bots and data scraping AI agents currently roam the internet as anonymous phantoms. If an agent crashes an enterprise database or manipulates a market, there is often no way to identify the person or company that deployed it. The internet is missing the foundational rules of the road. Without a way to link autonomous actions to accountable owners, the current AI expansion remains a systemic liability. This diagram shows the internet's vertical stack. AI governance usually happens at the top, in the application layer, using fragile prompt filters easily subverted by agents. Effective governance must move down to the infrastructure layer, the root level, where routing forms a structural choke point. This provides the mechanism for a worldwide AI DMV. Just like cars on a highway, trillions of AI agents must be issued digital passports and license plates before they can operate on the network. Moving the rules to the base layer creates structural compliance. If an agent cannot prove its identity at the registry level, it is denied the infrastructure required to act. The technical equivalent of a license plate is a decentralized identifier, or DID. These are globally unique cryptographic keys that bind an autonomous software entity to an accountable human or corporate owner. These act as cryptographic toll booths, positioned at the network perimeter, forcing every agent to authenticate before interacting with an API. An agent attempting to access a network must first present its cryptographic tag. The firewall verifies the key, opening the gate to allow data through. Without a valid plate, an agent is instantly deflected into a quarantine zone, isolated from the economic highway. Because this system relies on decentralized ledgers, identity verification is hard-coded into the protocol. This allows for distributed enforcement without requiring a central authority to manually police every individual interaction. Beyond security, this DMV model generates a massive financial surplus. Requiring digital license plates for trillions of agents creates a continuous stream of registration fees. Every time an agent authenticates at a firewall toll booth or renews its registry, it triggers an automated micro-remittance. The infrastructure itself becomes the revenue mechanism. We already have a real-world prototype for this economy, the nation of Anguilla and its administration of the .ai domain registry. This chart shows the impact on Anguilla's national budget. By capturing the fees from companies registering .ai domains, this single digital resource now funds 47% of their entire government budget and 16% of their total GDP. Anguilla proves that digital identity verification can be successfully transformed into a renewable, sovereign resource. This digital model mirrors the structure of the Alaska Permanent Fund, which taxes finite oil extraction to pay an annual civil dividend to every resident. When these microfees are applied to a population of agents projected to reach the trillions, the cumulative volume provides a revenue stream that scales with the machine economy. This creates the capital pool necessary to distribute a global universal basic income. In this framework, the proliferation of machine labor serves a dual purpose. Every new agent entering the network and paying for its registration increases the sovereign wealth fund. The more the machine economy expands, the more capital becomes available for human distribution. AI needs a worldwide DMV before it needs another chatbot. By moving the rules to the base layer of the internet, we force the slopocalypse to pay rent to humanity.
The tech industry poured over $1 trillion into artificial intelligence compute, building massive data centers and hoarding silicon to win the intelligence race. But this massive investment primarily produced a slopocalypse, a flood of zero marginal cost, highly derivative, synthetic text and code currently choking the digital commons. The engineers and executives driving this boom were entirely focused on whether they could build massive generative capabilities, bypassing the necessary work of building accountability protocols to track who actually deployed them. When an infinite supply of synthetic output hits an internet that lacks basic verification routing, the marginal value of that content drops below zero. This creates a severe capital revenue mismatch. $1 trillion of computing power is producing a digital landscape so degraded by untrustworthy noise that it struggles to generate sustainable economic return. The tech industry's attempt to govern these systems is known as the layer error. They are trying to regulate AI at the application layer, relying on prompt filters and post-hoc content moderation. This structurally fails because it requires evaluating infinite semantic permutations in real time, attempting to catch bad behavior only after the AI has already executed its generation. Unlike traditional software, AI agents are non-deterministic. They take active initiative to execute transactions, meaning prompt ejections easily bypass surface-level safeguards. True systemic governance requires moving down the structural stack to the identity, registry, and DNS root layers, the foundational routing infrastructure of the internet itself. Attempting to govern autonomous agents with text filters is like trying to regulate traffic by shouting at speeding cars. To enforce order, we need unbypassable physical infrastructure. Think of a fully autonomous cyber taxi operating in a major city. That vehicle requires a physical, state-issued license plate to legally use public roads. In the exact same way, an autonomous digital agent requires a worldwide passport to operate across the internet. This passport uses DNS ID to anchor a specific AI agent back to a legally recognized human. This creates a cryptographic toll booth. Firewalls scan for this verified lock before allowing API access. If an unverified agent hits the firewall, its packets are instantly dropped. This binary network-level enforcement eliminates the need to analyze the content of the slop. We stop the problem at the border before it consumes computing resources. By establishing a worldwide DMV at the internet's root, we immediately restore artificial scarcity, enforce legal accountability, and bring order to a previously chaotic digital landscape.
Forcing trillions of AI agents to register and annually renew digital passports creates an entirely new ecosystem of global namespace registration fees. A real-world proof of concept for this economic engine is running right now in the Caribbean island territory of Anguilla. Because Anguilla controls the .ai country code domain, the territory captures registration and renewal fees from every tech company claiming a namespace on their registry. This orange bar chart shows the exact scale of that windfall. As demand spiked, revenues from .ai registrations surged from a tiny fraction of their income to 47% of the entire state budget by 2025. The territory is using this capital to pay down its national debt, expand its international airport runway, and fund free healthcare for children and seniors. Anguilla proves that the monetization of digital scarcity and agent identity is not a speculative theory. It is an actively working economic engine successfully funding a society today. The next step is scaling Anguilla's localized digital windfall into a global framework.
A proven structural precedent for this already exists with the Alaska Permanent Fund, which taxes finite physical oil extraction and pays a direct annual dividend to the state's residents. The pivot for the 21st century swaps finite physical oil for the infinitely renewable digital resource of AI identity and registration at the DNS root. The global digital registry microfees generated by autonomous agents flow directly into a sovereign wealth fund, bypassing standard government taxation bureaucracy. This sovereign trust then distributes the accumulated capital directly to citizens in the form of a universal basic income dividend. We do not need another chatbot. We need a worldwide AI DMV, because treating digital identity as a toll booth is how we ensure the massive oversupply of AI output directly funds humanity's future. The tech industry poured over $1 trillion into artificial intelligence compute, building massive data centers and hoarding silicon to win the intelligence race. But this massive investment primarily produced a slopocalypse, a flood of zero marginal cost, highly derivative, synthetic text and code currently choking the digital commons. The engineers and executives driving this boom were entirely focused on whether they could build massive generative capabilities, bypassing the necessary work of building accountability protocols to track who actually deployed them. When an infinite supply of synthetic output hits an internet that lacks basic verification routing, the marginal value of that content drops below zero. This creates a severe capital revenue mismatch. $1 trillion of computing power is producing a digital landscape so degraded by untrustworthy noise that it struggles to generate sustainable economic return. The tech industry's attempt to govern these systems is known as the layer error. They are trying to regulate AI at the application layer, relying on prompt filters and post-hoc content moderation. This structurally fails because it requires evaluating infinite semantic permutations in real time, attempting to catch bad behavior only after the AI has already executed its generation. Unlike traditional software, AI agents are non-deterministic. They take active initiative to execute transactions, meaning prompt ejections easily bypass surface-level safeguards. True systemic governance requires moving down the structural stack to the identity, registry, and DNS root layers, the foundational routing infrastructure of the internet itself. Attempting to govern autonomous agents with text filters is like trying to regulate traffic by shouting at speeding cars. To enforce order, we need unbypassable physical infrastructure. Think of a fully autonomous cyber taxi operating in a major city. That vehicle requires a physical, state-issued license plate to legally use public roads. In the exact same way, an autonomous digital agent requires a worldwide passport to operate across the internet. This passport uses DNS ID to anchor a specific AI agent back to a legally recognized human. This creates a cryptographic toll booth. Firewalls scan for this verified lock before allowing API access. If an unverified agent hits the firewall, its packets are instantly dropped. This binary network-level enforcement eliminates the need to analyze the content of the slop. We stop the problem at the border before it consumes computing resources. By establishing a worldwide DMV at the internet's root, we immediately restore artificial scarcity, enforce legal accountability, and bring order to a previously chaotic digital landscape. Forcing trillions of AI agents to register and annually renew digital passports creates an entirely new ecosystem of global namespace registration fees. A real-world proof of concept for this economic engine is running right now in the Caribbean island territory of Anguilla.
Because Anguilla controls the .ai country code domain, the territory captures registration and renewal fees from every tech company claiming a namespace on their registry. This orange bar chart shows the exact scale of that windfall. As demand spiked, revenues from .ai registrations surged from a tiny fraction of their income to 47% of the entire state budget by 2025. The territory is using this capital to pay down its national debt, expand its international airport runway, and fund free healthcare for children and seniors. Anguilla proves that the monetization of digital scarcity and agent identity is not a speculative theory. It is an actively working economic engine successfully funding a society today. The next step is scaling Anguilla's localized digital windfall into a global framework.
A proven structural precedent for this already exists with the Alaska Permanent Fund, which taxes finite physical oil extraction and pays a direct annual dividend to the state's residents. The pivot for the 21st century swaps finite physical oil for the infinitely renewable digital resource of AI identity and registration at the DNS root. The global digital registry microfees generated by autonomous agents flow directly into a sovereign wealth fund, bypassing standard government taxation bureaucracy. This sovereign trust then distributes the accumulated capital directly to citizens in the form of a universal basic income dividend. We do not need another chatbot. We need a worldwide AI DMV, because treating digital identity as a toll booth is how we ensure the massive oversupply of AI output directly funds humanity's future.
Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're doing what we do best, taking fascinating source material, breaking it down visually, and uncovering the real story hiding right behind the headlines. And guys, today, we are tackling a massive, literally trillion-dollar problem. We're looking at a profound critique of our current tech landscape by commentator Brendan Dell, alongside a truly visionary solution that's bubbling up right now in the public discourse. We're going to explore a radical pivot. We'll see how we might transition from this terrifying, chaotic slopocalypse of digital junk into a strictly governed digital infrastructure that could, wait for it, literally pay out a universal dividend to humanity. Okay, let's dive right into this incredible critique to see how we got here and, more importantly, how we can actually fix it.
To properly set the stage for where we are right now in the tech world, we really have to look back at this highly relevant piece of cinematic wisdom. You probably know the one. This famous quote perfectly frames the exact question Brendan Dell is grappling with regarding the rapid, totally unchecked deployment of artificial intelligence over the last couple of years. I want you to genuinely reflect on the sheer speed of AI deployment recently. We are building and shipping these massive tools at a breakneck pace, just throwing billions of dollars at servers and computing power. But we aren't pausing for a single second to ask the fundamental question: what should we actually be using this for? We've proven we can create endless streams of synthetic content in milliseconds, but we totally bypass the conversation of whether we actually should. Are we building something genuinely useful for society, or are we just creating a massive, uncontrollable mess?
So let's get into Section 1, the trillion-dollar slop apocalypse, a crisis of negative value. To understand this crisis, just think about the grand, utopian vision pitched by major AI leaders like Dario Amodei. We were promised artificial intelligence that would act like a virtual country of geniuses, working around the clock to prove complex mathematical theorems, cure terrible diseases, and maybe even double the human lifespan. That was the pitch. Yet, our daily reality as consumers is, well, drastically different. Instead of a country of geniuses, we're currently living in an age of absolute digital abundance, of unwanted content. It's a dynamic of pure negative value. The supply of AI-generated content has skyrocketed for things nobody actually wanted in the first place. We are absolutely drowning in endless, artificially generated LinkedIn hot takes, these reductive article summaries that strip away all the nuance, and the creation of what feels like the 100,000th generic meditation app spun up by a single prompt. We were promised the cure for cancer, and instead our digital environment has become junk that you essentially have to pay people to haul away.
Which brings us to Section 2, reinventing the wheel. Basically, tech built for tech. Developers right now are frantically rushing to become AI native, just to turn out more products that nobody asked for. This builds perfectly on Brendan Dell's observation that, historically, a staggering 86.5% of tech created is just a series of make-money online plays dressed up in a fancy corporate fleece vest. It's a classic loop. Technology built entirely for other tech people, just to sell more technology. And AI has put this absurd dynamic on steroids. We have highly advanced coding tools built simply to write more unnecessary code faster. We have entire communities of tech bros spinning up completely useless apps in under an hour just to say they did it. We even have people trying to reverse engineer their own central nervous systems using an AI chatbot like Claude to analyze their biodata and tell them when they're experiencing stress. Think about how absurd that is. Using a massive server farm to calculate your stress levels instead of, simply noticing that you feel stressed. It's the ultimate illusion of innovation.
And make no mistake, the top minds in the industry are acutely aware of this negative value. When the founder of Y Combinator, Paul Graham, actively tells people he skips AI-generated emails, that is a massive red flag. Y Combinator is the world's premier startup accelerator. They're the ultimate gatekeepers of venture capital. If the gatekeepers of startup capital are actively penalizing the use of AI cold emails, then the AI is literally destroying financial value for the people using it. Paul Graham's point here is devastating to the current hype cycle. By using these automated tools to spam investors with generic, overly polite fluff, you're actively harming your own chances of success, because human beings are rapidly evolving to spot and just avoid this slop. Let's move to Section 3, the asymmetry of AI slop, a double black box.
This pollution isn't just an annoyance in our social feeds or our email inboxes anymore. It's actively polluting serious academic and scientific research, which has massive, terrifying implications for society. A recent Springer Nature study revealed a highly concerning reality regarding credibility. When researchers use AI as a self-automator to effectively one-click generate a paper, they hand over vital, complex work to a system that routinely hallucinates facts. Applying these large language models to complex research creates what's called a double black box. The researcher is producing supposedly high-level academic work at the speed of light, but they have no earthly idea what the neural network actually did to arrive at its conclusions. Think about the danger here in fields like structural engineering or pharmacology. If an AI hallucinates a formula for a bridge's load-bearing capacity and a researcher blindly publishes it as fact, the real-world consequences could be absolutely catastrophic.
This terrifying dynamic brings us to a brilliantly relatable concept known as Brandolini's law, or the asymmetry principle. It states that the amount of energy needed to refute nonsense is an order of magnitude bigger than that needed to produce it. This law perfectly explains why existing in the current AI era feels so fundamentally exhausting. Let's say it takes an AI exactly 2 seconds to hallucinate a completely fake historical event and cite a non-existent book. Any peer reviewer or fact checker doing their job properly will literally have to spend 3 hours digging through university archives just to definitively prove that the event never happened. The energy required to clean up the mess vastly outpaces the ease of creating it. This asymmetry isn't just a minor annoyance, it's actively destroying our collective productivity under the guise of enhancing it.
And the financial world is starting to quietly admit this whole emperor's new clothes reality. You have corporate boards of directors pointing to AI as their single biggest priority and greatest existential threat. Yet, at a recent major summit, billionaire investor Bill Ackman looked around a room filled with some of the wealthiest, most connected tech investors on the planet and basically said the quiet part out loud. He admitted that, aside from automating some low-level back-office legal paperwork and clerical workflows, he hasn't seen much real success. This is an incredibly revealing moment. The smartest money in the world has poured hundreds of billions into this technology, yet they are secretly deeply skeptical because they cannot point to a single instance of a positive, world-changing breakthrough that actually justifies the hype. All right, Section 4, a genuinely useful solution. Time for the plot twist. This brings us to a massive paradigm shift in our explainer today. We're moving from a fairly bleak critique to a highly visionary, tangible fix. Brendan Dell posed a very simple but incredibly difficult challenge to the internet. He asked, who out there is doing something genuinely useful with this technology? If we aren't just making spam bots, generating fake images, or reinventing the CRM for the 1,000th time, what is the actual endgame for artificial intelligence? Well, the discourse surrounding this exact question produced an absolutely brilliant answer that completely flips the script.
And that answer is Section 5. Passports for AI agents, creating the rules of the road.
The brilliant idea bubbling up is that we urgently need to build a massive identity management platform specifically designed for the upcoming explosion of autonomous AI agents. We aren't just dealing with passive chatbots waiting for a prompt anymore. We're rapidly moving toward an era where independent AI agents will roam the web, executing tasks on behalf of human masters, and they absolutely must have rules. As trillions of autonomous agents scale across the internet, they have to be registered and held accountable through a step-by-step identity infrastructure.
Before an AI agent can execute a stock trade, or scrape an entire database, or send 10,000 emails, it must be issued a verifiable digital passport. It needs an international license to operate. It needs a digital license plate. And it must carry a cryptographic key that links every single action it takes directly back to the human or corporation that deployed it. To truly grasp how vital this is, consider a highly relatable physical comparison. Think about the physical infrastructure required for self-driving cars, like cybertaxis. We would never, ever allow a massive fleet of autonomous vehicles to drive on our city streets without physical license plates, government registration, and strict adherence to physical traffic laws. If a self-driving car runs a red light and crashes, we immediately know exactly who owns it and whose insurance to bill because of that license plate. Yet right now, if an autonomous AI agent crashes a hospital's database or manipulates a financial market, we have almost no way to hold anyone accountable. Why on earth are we letting trillions of AI agents flood our digital highways with the exact same regulated toll booths and identity infrastructure we demand in the physical world?
And this leads us to Section 6, Funding Humanity with AI, the Sovereign Dividend.
Now let's explore the absolute most exciting part of this explainer. This identity infrastructure doesn't just create digital safety, it actually generates massive, world-changing economic wealth. If every single AI agent requires a digital passport and a license plate to operate, someone has to collect those registration fees, right? This leads us directly to the Alaska Permanent Fund model. In Alaska, the state takes a natural, sovereign resource, oil in the ground, manages it, taxes the companies extracting it, and then pays out a direct civil dividend to every single resident every year. It's a working model of universal basic income. In the digital age, the oil isn't in the physical ground. The natural resource is the internet itself, and the right to operate an AI agent within it. By building toll booths and charging tech companies for these digital license plates, we can create a clean, renewable sovereign wealth fund, specifically designed to pay a universal digital dividend to everyday citizens. Now, if you think this sounds like an impossible, utopian science fiction concept, look at the very real-world data from the tiny Caribbean island of Anguilla. They are already acting as a working prototype for this exact sovereign dividend model. Decades ago, Anguilla was randomly assigned the .ai country code for their web domains. Now, because every major tech company on Earth wants a .ai web address, they have to pay Anguilla a registration fee. This tiny island nation perfectly monetized the AI boom far better than most Silicon Valley startups ever will. They took a simple digital namespace and successfully turned it into a sovereign wealth generator, proving once and for all that digital toll booths are incredibly lucrative. To really put the scale of this into perspective, that single, seemingly minor digital sovereign resource is so incredibly lucrative that it accounts for a staggering 16% of Anguilla's entire gross domestic product. 16%. Just let that number breathe for a second. 16% of a country's total economic output is funded purely by collecting a digital tax on artificial intelligence domain names. Now take a step back and imagine scaling that concept up globally. Imagine if the United States or the European Union applied a microtax to the digital license plates of the trillions of autonomous AI agents executing tasks across the web. The revenue generated would be absolutely astronomical. We're looking at a profound, almost unbelievable contrast in how we approach the future of technology. On one hand, an estimated $1 trillion has effectively been incinerated by tech billionaires in a frantic arms race to generate a vortex of unwanted, useless digital slop. They've spent fortunes just to pollute the internet. But in stark contrast, a tiny island nation has provided a brilliant working blueprint for how digital governance can actually protect the public space while simultaneously funding humanity. It is the ultimate gap between wasting capital to create chaos and thoughtfully regulating a digital resource to create real, tangible, and ongoing societal dividends. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this highly provocative thought regarding the future of our digital world. Are we going to simply sit back and let this unregulated wave of AI slop completely bury our internet, our academia, and our daily productivity? Or are we going to demand the digital infrastructure necessary to build toll booths on the digital highway? We have the blueprints, we know the exact regulatory framework needed to hold these agents accountable, and we have proven economic models showing how the resulting revenue can be redistributed to everyday citizens. The choice is entirely up to us. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep asking the big questions.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely pumped to take you on this journey today. We're going to dive headfirst into the current state of AI, specifically, the chaotic, glitchy mess of unregulated AI that is currently flooding the internet. But And this is the exciting part. We'll also explore how this exact crisis could actually fund a highly structured, incredibly hopeful future for all of us. We're talking about flipping a massive digital headache into actual human prosperity. To figure out where we're headed, we really got to understand where we are right now. $1 trillion. Let that sink in. That is the jaw-dropping amount of money currently being dumped into AI capital expenditures. And what are we getting for this massive investment so far? Basically, a giant capital revenue mismatch. We're churning out negative value, totally unpredictable synthetic content. Or, to put it bluntly, digital slop.
You know, the tech industry right now, it perfectly mirrors that classic Jurassic Park dilemma. Like Brendan Dell points out, the tech world was so obsessed with scaling these massive models and running things faster, they entirely skipped a crucial step. They literally didn't stop to think if they should, or actually scratch that. They didn't stop to build the accountability and routing infrastructure needed to actually bring these wild agents into the real economy. It's like they built 1 million super-fast cars, but completely forgot to build the roads and the traffic lights.
All right, so here is our game plan for today. Point 1, the $1 trillion slopocalypse. Point 2, fixing the layer error. Point 3, the worldwide AI DMV. Point 4, the Anguilla prototype. And finally, point 5, sovereign wealth and UBI. Let's see exactly how we turn this internet crisis into a major societal payoff.
Section 1. The $1 trillion slopocalypse. Right now, we are watching a massive economic failure unfold, where a flood of unverified, zero marginal cost content is just totally degrading the internet.
So, the slopocalypse, yeah, it's a funny word, but it is a profoundly serious macroeconomic problem. When you flood a digital space that has zero verification with infinite automated junk, the value of that content literally drops below zero. It's what we call a double black box problem. Basically, we don't know exactly how the AI is making its decisions, and worse, we have absolutely no verifiable identity of who actually deployed it.
Section 2. Fixing the layer error. Okay, so how on earth do we actually govern these agents? We're about to shift from this chaotic glitch aesthetic to a highly structured, almost retro-futuristic kind of bureaucracy.
Just look at the stark contrast between the application layer and the registry layer. Right now, the industry tries to control AI at the application level, using prompt filters or API moderation after the fact. But here's the thing. AI agents are dynamic. They take active initiative. A single clever prompt injection bypasses those safeguards entirely. Trying to filter infinite semantic possibilities, it doesn't scale at all. We have to go way deeper, right down to the registry and DNS layer. The source material actually has a perfect analogy for this. Application layer controls? It's literally like trying to regulate a busy highway by standing on the sidewalk and shouting at speeding cars. I mean, it's completely ineffective and, frankly, a little ridiculous. Real systemic governance means enforcing the rules before a single line of code is even executed. It means cutting off network routing to any agent that doesn't have a digital license plate. We've got to stop policing behavior after the fact and start enforcing identity at the very root of the network.
Section 3. The worldwide AI DMV. This structural shift, it is absolutely crucial. Because if autonomous physical cyber taxis need physical license plates to drive on real roads, then trillions of autonomous software agents need the exact same thing to navigate our digital highways. AI identity has to be treated as root internet infrastructure.
So the key takeaway here is that this infrastructure relies on 3 main primitives. First, you've got the passport. This ties the agent to a legally recognized entity through domain registration. Second, the license, providing authorization via verifiable credentials. And third, the plates, or tags, which enforce accountability right down at the kernel level. Think of it as a strict digital toll booth. If an agent's packet shows up without verified credentials, it just gets dropped at the network firewall. Boom. No identity, no access.
And hey, this isn't just some pipe dream. In this 3-layer architecture, we're talking about a live, cryptographic trust layer known as the Mole Trust Framework. It's actually been operational since March 2026, and get this, it is already indexing over 44,000 agents. So the infrastructure to build this worldwide DMV, it exists and is working right now.
Section 4. The Anguilla prototype. Now you might be wondering, how does this actually generate wealth for humanity? Well, let's look at a working macroeconomic prototype that proves taxing a digital namespace is not only possible, but it actually transitions us toward a much brighter, greener reality. Anguilla is basically the perfect real-world prototype for this. Since they own the .ai country code, demand just exploded when artificial intelligence took off. And Anguilla's leadership, they brilliantly turned this massive windfall into public good. We're talking funding for airport expansions, huge renewable energy investments, and free healthcare for seniors and kids. They are directly capturing the economic value of AI identity registration.
47%. By 2025, nearly half of Anguilla's entire government revenue is projected to come purely from .ai domain registrations. Just wrap your head around that scale for a second. An entire state's budget, fundamentally supported by simply taxing a digital namespace.
Let's break down the actual numbers, because the growth is just wild. We're going from under $3 million back in 2018 to a projected $93 million in 2025. Now, just to be super precise here and correct a common mistake you'll often see in the media, this 47% is their share of government revenue, not total GDP. Tourism is still their biggest GDP driver at around 37%. But as a source of state income, this digital registry went from being just a tiny side hustle to an absolute fiscal pillar.
Section 5. Sovereign Wealth and UBI. All right, this brings us to the final, and honestly the most exciting concept. How do we take what Anguilla did and scale it globally? How do we use these digital namespace rents to fund an actual, hopeful, solar punk future?
Well, the most direct structural equivalent we have is the Alaska Permanent Fund. Since the 70s, Alaska has taken a chunk of its oil revenues, invested it, and paid out a yearly cash dividend straight to its residents. But here is the massive difference. The Alaska model relies on oil, a finite physical resource that eventually runs out. The AI agent registry model, that capitalizes on a digital namespace. It's expanding, it's renewable, and it's totally non-extractive. Because the registry charges recurring fees for cryptographic lookups, this asset scales infinitely alongside the machine economy without depleting the physical earth. It's a real game changer. So let's step through exactly how this builds out into a three-step financial pipeline. Step 1. Governments collect micro-remittances from AI agent registrations and API verification fees. Again, those digital DMV toll booths. Step 2, all those collected rents get routed straight into a sovereign wealth fund endowment. And Step 3, those funds are distributed back to everyday citizens as a direct, unconditional basic income dividend. It is a clean, infinitely renewable wealth pipeline powered entirely by machine transactions. And if you're skeptical about UBI, let's look objectively at the empirical data, because direct cash transfers actually work. A recent open research study spearheaded by Sam Altman showed recipients had a 25% jump in savings and a 9 to 14% boost in educational and entrepreneurial activities. So by simply taxing the artificial scarcity of AI identity, we can directly empirically fund human prosperity and stability.
We have the tech to verify these agents. We have the macroeconomic models proving that taxing the digital namespace works. We literally have empirical evidence that direct dividends benefit society. We are sitting on top of $1 trillion slopocalypse that could absolutely fund humanity's future. The only real question left is, will we choose to step up, enforce to infrastructure, and build this worldwide DMV before the tech industry launches the next chatbot? Think about it. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and keep asking the big questions.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We are currently standing at the edge of $1 trillion precipice. It's this wild moment in technological history where explosive, unchecked growth is colliding head-on with massive, unmanaged chaos. So today's explainer is going to take a really dramatic, almost cinematic look at a very real, very pressing concept, the AI DMV. How do we take this overwhelming tidal wave of artificial intelligence and transform it? How do we turn it from a chaotic mess into a protective, economic scaffold that actually funds humanity? Let's figure it out.
To really anchor our explainer today, I want to start with a quote that hit me hard. It's Dr. Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. Our sources reference this exact sentiment, and honestly, it perfectly captures that sleek, slightly ominous corporate labs vibe of AI development today. We are building at the speed of light. Actually, scratch that. We're building faster than we can even comprehend. We're unleashing endless artificial intelligence into the wild without building the digital cages, or more accurately, the digital roads and traffic lights to actually manage it.
And the sheer scale of this oversight, it's staggering. $1 trillion. That's the amount billionaires and tech giants have poured into AI development. And what's the immediate result of all that cash? A massive, undeniable overproduction of negative value junk. We're seeing thousands of redundant applications, endless synthetic spam loops, and a digital ecosystem that's rapidly drowning in its own excess. It's a massive financial failure of utility, and that's before we even get to the root of the problem.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the trillion-dollar slop apocalypse. Second, the infrastructure accountability crisis. Third, a worldwide AI DMV. Fourth, the cryptographic toll booth. Fifth, the Anguilla success story. And finally, sovereign UBI for humanity. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the trillion-dollar slopocalypse. Right now, our internet is slowly suffocating. It's becoming totally flooded with chaotic, glitchy, synthetic data. We call this impending threat the slopocalypse. It's the massive overproduction of synthetic, negative-value AI junk resulting from an infinite supply. The sources ground this in a really fundamental economic law. When supply goes through the roof, value plummets. When you drastically increase the supply of something that no one ever wanted in the first place, like the 100,000th redundant meditation app, or endless AI-generated spam comments, it just becomes junk. Its value literally goes negative. It creates a reality where people actively skip and avoid these platforms entirely.
Which brings us to Section 2, the infrastructure accountability crisis.
Now, to fix this chaos, we have to look at the underlying architecture of the internet itself and shift our thinking toward a hyper-minimalist wireframe matrix of rules. It's a stark contrast. Up at the application layer, the stuff you and I interact with, it is purely endless synthetic slop and AI chaos. It is totally unregulated. But drop down to the identity and DNS layer, the root level of the internet, it's characterized by cryptographic handshakes and verifiable imposing order. We simply cannot govern AI at the messy application layer. We must move governance down the stack to the sterile, highly structured infrastructure layer. Because as they say, infrastructure is destiny.
Moving on to Section 3. A worldwide AI DMV. We need to start looking at this digital infrastructure crisis through the lens of a physical traffic system. I want you to imagine a world of bureaucratic retrofuturism. Think brewless concrete, stamped passports, endless hyper-organized files. If AI agents are going to act like autonomous cyber taxis driving all over our digital highway, they need credentials, period. As trillions of agents exponentially expand, they absolutely must have worldwide passports, international driver's licenses, verifiable network tags, digital license plates, and cryptographic keys. Just like a self-driving car needs physical plates and insurance to obey the rules of the road, an AI agent must have an established, registered identity to operate. Let's look at how that works in Section 4, the cryptographic toll booth. So how do we actually enforce this massive global system of digital paperwork? It's a strict 1-2-3 process that builds artificial scarcity at the very root level. Step 1, an autonomous agent attempts to interact with the network. It must present a cryptographic passport, something like a W3C verifiable credential mapped directly to a secure top-level domain. Step 2, the network firewall checks for this compliance license plate. And Step 3, if the agent cannot prove its identity, it is dropped right at the routing layer. Boom, done. Unauthenticated requests are functionally isolated from the economic highway. They cannot route packets, they can't execute API calls, and they can't consume compute. This instantly stops the endless spam loops by making sure anonymous agents are denied the infrastructure they need to scale.
This is not just theory, which we'll see in Section 5, the Anguilla success story.
Now, you might be thinking this sounds like a massive theoretical science fiction pitch, but it is already happening in the real world today. $32 million. The IMF confirmed that in 2023, the tiny island nation of Anguilla generated this massive amount of revenue simply from registering .ai domain names. This right here is the foundational working model for taxing digital identity infrastructure. But what does that number actually represent for them? According to reports, this digital naming infrastructure has grown to fund nearly half, 47%, of Anguilla's entire government budget. They are already successfully monetizing the exact digital space that AI companies are desperately scrambling to claim.
And for our final data punch on this, 16%. That is the massive portion of their total gross domestic product that comes directly from this single digital asset. They've successfully turned a digital identifier into a highly lucrative, clean, sovereign resource. It's brilliant.
Which brings us to our final section, sovereign UBI for humanity.
This resolves our whole narrative today not into some grim tech dystopia, but into a lush, solar punk utopia. Compare the old depleting resource model,
famously used by Alaska to fund citizen dividends through finite, ecologically harmful physical commodities like oil, to this new regenerative infrastructure model powered by AI identity. The core asset here isn't extracted from the earth, it's infinite digital identity namespaces. The byproduct isn't pollution, it's clean, renewable cryptographic handshakes. And the human benefit? Global automated civil UBI dividends. As trillions of agents scale up, the namespace fees required to register their digital license plates create a massive sovereign wealth fund. We literally turn the Slopocalypse into a protective economic scaffold that pays a basic income to humanity.
I really want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on today. As trillions of autonomous AI agents prepare to flood our digital highways, we have a profound choice to make. Are we going to drown in the Slopocalypse, suffocated by glitchy, negative value junk? Or will we build the worldwide AI DMV, strictly enforce the rules of the road, and make this endless wave of technology pay rent to humanity? Infrastructure is destiny. Let's make sure it serves us. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. It's been an absolute blast digging into this structure with you. Stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.
Let's just dive right into this. Tech billionaires and venture capitalists have essentially set roughly $1 trillion on fire over the last few years, pouring it into AI compute infrastructure. And what do we actually have to show for it? We're drowning in what industry analysts are perfectly calling slop, just negative value, synthetically generated junk. As an internet infrastructure architect and, frankly, a deeply skeptical macroeconomic technologist, I look at this current hype cycle and I see a massive structural void. So in this explainer, we are going to look way past the chatbots. We're going to conduct a highly rigorous, exhaustively grounded macroeconomic analysis of internet infrastructure. And we are going to prove exactly why AI desperately needs a worldwide DMV before it needs yet another probabilistic text generator.
Real quick, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll hit Slopocalypse versus core infrastructure, the economic failure of Slop, the worldwide DMV architecture, the sovereign wealth engine, addressing critical steelman objections, and finally, taxing scarcity to fund humanity. All right, Section 1, Slopocalypse versus core infrastructure, the $1 trillion misallocation.
We really have to channel Dr. Ian Malcolm's classic Jurassic Park ethos here. People are so busy noticing that they are not stopping to ask if they should. I mean, billionaires have built these massive, incomprehensible systems capable of generating literally infinite synthetic output, but they completely failed to build the civic architecture required to actually govern it. It's like we built a 1,000-horsepower engine, but totally forgot to install a steering wheel and brakes.
The divide here is absolutely stark. Look at the application layer. Trying to police infinite synthetic output with, content filtering and human-level guardrails like RLHF, it's a chaotic, mathematically impossible task. It's just slop chaos. But you shift down to the infrastructure layer. That's where true, rigorous governance happens. DNS routing, W3C verifiable credentials, root registries. You take this impossible infinite problem and you distill it down to a manageable finite discipline of strict network verification.
Okay, Section 2, the economic failure of slop. Supply up, value down. We need to define exactly what we're dealing with here. A slop apocalypse is, at its core, a severe macroeconomic market failure. The principle is just economics 101. Supply goes up, value goes down. When the marginal cost of generating text, code, and images basically hits absolute zero, you drastically inflate the supply of unrequested, low-value SaaS apps, stuff nobody were asked for. And that output doesn't just become worthless, its value actually goes negative. It literally becomes digital junk you have to pay to haul away.
And this is absolutely crucial. This negative value output isn't just some annoyance cluttering up your social media feed, it's an active, toxic threat to the AI models themselves. This data hunger leads to what researchers call model collapse. It's an Ouroboros, the mythical serpent, eating its own tail. These models scrape the internet, they ingest their own low-quality slop, and they actually poison their future iterations. We urgently need an immediate structural boundary at the infrastructure level.
Which brings us to Section 3, the worldwide DMV architecture, establishing digital rules of the road.
To actually build this, we have to rely on foundational W3C standards, the World Wide Web Consortium. A decentralized identifier, or a DID, is essentially a globally unique cryptographic passport. It's completely self-controlled. It's anchored to a verifiable ledger, or a DNS root. And here is the key point. It contains absolutely zero personal attributes. So you preserve complete privacy while guaranteeing identity resolution.
So think about a physical DMV, right? Just as a 4,000-pound autonomous cyber taxi absolutely requires physical license plates to drive on our physical streets, an autonomous digital agent needs rules of the digital road. The physical passport? That maps directly to the digital DID for global identification. The driver's license maps to a verifiable credential, or VC, which dictates delegated authorization and spending limits. And the license plates map straight to a root registry handshake for strict network accountability.
And here's where the actual enforcement kicks in, the cryptographic toll booth. Look, if an autonomous agent cannot produce a valid, cryptographically verifiable passport mapped to a registry event, its packets are just dropped, period. Right at the Zero Trust Network firewall or DNS routing layer, without these verifiable tags, agents are mathematically starved of distribution. No tags, you can't route packets, you can't hold a wallet, you can't authenticate with APIs. We are actively enforcing artificial scarcity to mandate accountability.
Let's walk through the exact mechanics here. 1. An agent initializes. 2. A DNS handshake instantly verifies its identity. 3. If those packets are unverified, the cryptographic toll booth drops them, keeping the entire network clean. But 4, and this is the massive paradigm shift, if verified, a micro-remittance, literally fractions of a cent, is triggered at the registry level and routed straight into a sovereign wealth universal basic income.
Moving into Section 4, the Sovereign Wealth Engine. Empirically proven dividend models.
We're all pretty familiar with the classic extractive resource era, right? Think of the Alaska Permanent Fund. Alaska taxes a finite, depleting physical commodity, oil, and routes those royalties into a sovereign wealth fund to pay citizens a yearly dividend. But the agent infrastructure era is entirely post-extractive. By charging those micro-remittances at the DNS and registry route for validation, we're capitalizing on an infinite, exponentially expanding, perfectly clean digital commodity, namespace verification and agent computation.
Now, if you're sitting there thinking monetizing a namespace can't actually generate real sovereign wealth, look at this staggering number. Roughly 47%. This is the current real-world reality of the island of Anguilla's .ai domain registry right now.
The empirical proof is right here in the logarithmic growth of Anguilla's state budget. In the years before the AI breakthrough, it was under 1%. By 2023, it hit roughly 21%, 2024, 23%, and by 2025, they collected an astonishing $85.3 million. That represents almost 50%, about 47% of their entire government revenue. This empirically, objectively proves the unit economics of a digital namespace acting as a massive sovereign wealth engine.
But, as a policy analyst, I have to exercise some extremely rigorous fact-checking discipline here. You will see widespread claims from popular aggregators saying .ai sales account for over 10 or 16% of Anguilla's gross domestic product. No, that is a fundamental macroeconomic error. We need to explicitly correct this conflation. These domain registrations are non-tax treasury revenue funding the government budget. They do not represent the total domestic economic output of the territory. Precision really matters when we're talking about designing global infrastructure.
Let's hit Section 5. Addressing critical steelman objections, stress testing the toll booth.
Let's act as our own harshest critics and dismantle the strongest counterarguments with strict engineering. First up, jurisdictional enforcement. If an agent runs from a rogue state, how do we regulate it? Simple. We literally don't. Zero Trust firewalls just drop their unverified packets. They starve in complete isolation. Second, registry capture. How do we prevent some central authority from owning all the agents? We use DIDs, which are cryptographically self-controlled by the user, not a state. Third, surveillance risks. Mitigated because DIDs contain absolute zero personally identifiable information. And finally, dynamic auditing. Static credentials fail at runtime, so we implement challenge response mechanisms to verify an agent's exact state at the very moment of a transaction. The architecture absolutely holds up to the harshest scrutiny.
Finally, Section 6. Taxing scarcity to fund humanity, the final paradigm.
By treating AI identity as core internet infrastructure, we flip the entire economic failure of the Slop apocalypse on its head. If we enforce this cryptographic toll booth at the root DNS layer, we mathematically ensure that the machine economy, this whole Slop economy, is strictly mandated to pay rent to the humans it displaces.
And the absolute beauty of this infrastructure is its scale. To quote the underlying research, as agents scale toward infinity, the fund scales with them. We aren't relying on extracting finite oil from the ground anymore. We are tapping into the logarithmic expansion of machine agents as an infinite, clean, renewable well for universal basic income.
Trillions of autonomous AI agents are coming online. They are going to require worldwide passports, international driver's licenses, and cryptographic tags to obey the digital rules of the road. If we structure this public infrastructure correctly, the slop apocalypse literally funds humanity. So the ultimate question we have to ask our tech leaders today is this: why on earth are we still pouring billions into building another chatbot when we so urgently need to build the worldwide DMV?
Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you've been in tech for a minute, you probably treat every new AI claim as pure hype until it's actually running in production. I completely get it, so today we're skipping the VC pitch decks and the marketing fluff. Instead, we're doing a clinical, systems-level teardown of a governance framework known as the anti-slop thesis. Basically, it's about treating AI agent identity as core public infrastructure. Let's dive into it.
To really grasp this structural fix, we need to start with this massive number, $1 trillion. That's the estimated capital flooding into AI right now. But let's be honest, a lot of the visible output from that mountain of cash feels like, well, synthetic junk. We're seeing a massive overproduction of unverified, one-click copycat apps and reductive social content. A lot of it is just hype. Which brings us right back to that classic Jurassic Park critique. You know the line. And honestly, it hits the nail on the head for an industry building at breakneck speed without any real architectural accountability. We're literally scaling a nation of geniuses inside data centers, but we completely skip the foundational engineering question of how to build verifiable guardrails. So here's our roadmap. We'll cover the economic critique, the layer error we're currently making, identity primitives, sovereign funding, some actual empirical proof, and finally, objections and reality.
All right, Section 1, the critique.
Let's steelman the strongest good faith critique of the ecosystem right now, the negative value slopocalypse. It comes down to brutal basic economics. If you drastically increase the supply of something literally nobody asked for, like unverified synthetic data, the marginal value doesn't just drop to zero, it actually goes negative. We are having to spend our own time and compute just to filter it out. The industry is effectively flooding the market with unwanted output.
Moving on to Section 2, the layer error. So, structurally, why are our current safety strategies basically a dead end? Well, right now, AI governance lives almost entirely at the application layer. We're talking prompt filters, content moderation, RLHF. But trying to police an infinitely expanding chaotic output space at the user level, it's literally like trying to regulate a highway by standing on the curb and shouting at individual speeding cars. It doesn't scale. True systemic control means moving governance down the stack. We need infrastructure layer governance, DNS root protocols, cryptographic handshakes. Stop shouting at cars and start checking credentials at the network firewall.
Which leads us to Section 3, agent identity primitives.
To actually bake governance into the infrastructure, we have to define the systems-level identity primitives needed for network routing. We absolutely cannot have autonomous agents roaming the web anonymously at a trillion scale. Think about it. Physical cars need a registration, license plates, and insurance to share public roads, right? Digital actors need those same rules. At the systems level, every AI agent needs a cryptographic passport for identification, a license for authorization, and tags or keys for accountability. This builds a rock-solid, unbroken chain of accountability back to a real human or organization.
And here's the enforcement mechanism, the cryptographic toll booth. If an autonomous agent can't verify its identity with a valid credential tied to a secure top-level domain registry, credential gating just drops it at the network firewall. End of story. It functionally cannot route packets, it can't hold a crypto wallet, and it definitely can't execute API handshakes. We're taking the impossible problem of policing infinite synthetic output and turning it into the highly manageable problem of policing network access.
Okay, Section 4, sovereign funding.
Now, the macroeconomic implications of enforcing these registry fees globally are fascinating. Think about the Alaska Permanent Fund, which pays citizens a dividend from state oil revenue. It's the closest precedent we have. But there is a massive structural difference here. Alaska capitalizes on a finite, extractive, depleting physical resource. An agent identity namespace, however, is an expanding, renewable, non-extractive digital resource. As autonomous agents scale toward infinity, this sovereign resource actually grows right along with them.
Let's break down how this works procedurally. First, an agent has to get a credential issued to even operate. Second, every single time that agent initializes, a micro remittance hits the registry layer. It's basically paying its own tax to use the road.
Third, these continuous network tolls directly capitalize a sovereign wealth trust. And finally, that trust pays out a universal basic income or a citizen dividend. We turn this massive autonomous expansion from a negative value slopocalypsis into a protective economic scaffold that actually funds humanity.
Let's look at Section 5, Empirical Proof, specifically Anguilla.
Look, as veteran engineers, you want to see the production data, right? Well, here is the working prototype. According to verified IMF data, the Anguilla.ai domain registry is projected to generate approximately 47% of the government's total revenue in 2025. That's up significantly from about 20% in 2023. Just by owning and registering the relevant top-level namespace for AI, this small nation has essentially turned infrastructure access into a massive sovereign funding mechanism.
But we need to explicitly flag a really common analytical error here. That 47% figure, that represents a share of Anguilla's government revenue, not their total gross domestic product. You'll see a lot of aggregators and commentators conflating the two, but as rigorous analysts, we have to stick to the actual data. It is strictly government revenue.
All right, Section 6, Objections and Operational Realities.
Because no systems architecture is perfect, we have to rigorously audit this thesis and steelman the strongest structural objections, and there are some huge ones. First, the inherent danger of root capture. Whoever controls the root DNS layer effectively controls all the agents, which introduces severe registry centralization and massive surveillance risks. Also, who exactly gets to set and capture these fees? Furthermore, how do you actually enforce a cryptographic toll booth across a borderless, multi-jurisdictional internet without fracturing the entire web? Finally, we have to be super critical here. Is this actually a genuine public benefit, or just another Web3 token land grab dressed up in fancy new terminology? These are very real, unresolved operational complexities.
And we also have to explicitly label the foundational premise of this whole thesis. The idea that trillions of agents are imminent and will exponentially expand to require this massive infrastructure, at this stage, that is entirely unverified, speculative design. We are essentially planning infrastructure for a traffic jam that hasn't fully materialized yet.
Finally, Section 7, What exists versus what is designed.
To wrap this up, we have to cleanly separate what is proven and operational from what is merely theoretical architecture. The defensible claims are strong. The application layer error is completely real. Prompt filters are absolutely failing. Anguilla's revenue flow is a proven empirical fact. And the basic verifiable credential protocols do exist. But we have to strictly hedge the unbuilt assumptions. A perfectly enforceable, unbypassable global cryptographic toll booth and a seamlessly capitalized global sovereign trust dividend, right now that remains purely speculative design.
I want to leave every systems architect and engineer watching with one final provocative structural question. If we actually move AI governance down the stack to the DNS and registry layer, will we successfully save the internet from negative value slop and fund humanity? Or are we merely building the most powerful, centralized surveillance toll booth the digital world has ever seen? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I highly encourage you to dig into the source architecture yourselves and see what you think.
Companies have poured roughly $1 trillion into artificial intelligence development, but instead of a frictionless future, the result is a deluge of synthetic web pages, unrequested apps, and programmatic SEO. People call it the Slopocalypse. The tech industry has been entirely focused on scaling raw compute. They obsessed over whether they could build these massive models and almost completely ignored the social and architectural control planes needed to manage them. The economics here are brutal. When the marginal cost of generating text, code, and images drops to zero, supply shoots to infinity. This massive glut of digital content actively destroys the value of the network we rely on. Attempting to fix this structural failure with better prompts or application-level filters is futile. We are dealing with a missing infrastructure problem. The core vulnerability is anonymity. Right now, autonomous agents are scaling into the trillions, and they are allowed to roam the internet and execute tasks without any inherent accountability. Current security tools weren't built for this. Systems like OAuth and raw API keys are designed for human users. When applied to non-human actors, they act like easily abused shared passwords, rather than stable, permanent identities. We don't need another chatbot. What the internet requires is a worldwide DMV for the machine economy. When automobiles first flooded city streets, the chaos forced us to invent license plates and basic rules of the road. We can only tame the swarm of autonomous agents by forcing them to register for verifiable digital plates. That digital license plate takes the form of a decentralized identifier, or DID. A DID is a permanent, cryptographically secure username that the agent controls natively. It does not rely on permission from a central tech giant to exist. Next is the digital passport, officially known as a verifiable credential. This is an offline verifiable proof that explicitly declares exactly which organization owns the agent and what specific tasks it is authorized to perform. This moves governance all the way down the network stack. If an agent attempts to pass a network firewall or an API gateway without a valid DID and credential handshake, its request is instantly dropped. Moving identity to the base routing layer creates a strict cryptographic toll booth. It automatically starves anonymous, rogue bots of the basic infrastructure they need to operate and scale. You might be wondering if a single tech monopoly will capture this system. Because this framework relies on open W3C and IETF standards, no single identity provider can own or extort the root layer. There is also the risk of evasion, but enterprise security operates on cost avoidance.
Companies will gladly absorb a nominal $150 registry fee rather than risk an average $4.9 million data breach caused by an untagged rogue agent. To prevent spoofing, the agent's private cryptographic keys remain locked in secure hardware modules. The language model's probabilistic reasoning, and its hallucinations, cannot access or alter them. Compliance with this DMV layer will not rely on goodwill. It will be ruthlessly enforced by enterprise budgets and hard deterministic constraints. Just like standard web domains, these new agent namespaces require registration, verification, and renewal fees. This creates a massive, untapped revenue stream. We already have a working model for this. The territory of Anguilla inadvertently proved the concept by turning its legacy.ai country code domain into a strategic national asset. This chart shows the percentage share of .ai domain revenues in Anguilla's state budget. In 2023, revenue hit roughly $32 million, funding over 20% of the budget. By 2025, renewals pushed collections to $85.3 million, funding nearly 47%. Some aggregators conflate this revenue with 16% of the island's gross domestic product. That is a basic macroeconomic error. These are non-tax treasury receipts, not a measure of the territory's total domestic economic output. Anguilla proves that a seemingly invisible digital registry can act as a multi-million-dollar economic engine, capable of funding hard civic infrastructure. The ultimate operational precedent for distributing this kind of wealth is the Alaska Permanent Fund. It was created in 1976 to manage the state's financial windfall from the Prudhoe Bay oil discovery. The state takes a percentage of oil royalties and protects it in a principal account. The investment returns go into an earnings reserve, paying an annual citizen dividend. That unlike finite oil, the demand for AI agent identity is a renewable, infinitely expanding digital resource. Forcing the machine economy to pay for its own digital license plates tames the swarm of untagged agents. It converts a deluge of digital waste into a sovereign wealth fund that pays rent directly to humanity.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are pulling from a really comprehensive new report to explore how digital chaos can basically turn into cash. It's a completely wild concept that takes the terrifying, chaotic mess of autonomous AI and turns it into something you'd probably never expect, a literal universal basic income paycheck for you, the listener. If you've been watching the explosion of AI agents, you know it's getting messy out there. But ironically, the massive liability of these autonomous bots might be the exact mechanism we need to fund human prosperity. Let's dive right in.
So right now, 2 AI bots belonging to a massive logistics firm are stuck in an automated loop. It is a complete mess. One bot is optimizing for shipping speed and booking premium flights, while the other is trying to minimize fuel costs, so it just immediately cancels those flights, over and over again at machine speed. And by the time human engineers actually noticed, the firm had racked up $2 million in rebooking fees, which is just staggering. I mean, that is the slop economy in action.
Well, that $2 million loop is a textbook symptom of what industry insiders call agent sprawl. We aren't dealing with passive chatbots anymore. They are actually out there doing things. We have these autonomous bots actively executing financial transactions at machine speed, but they completely lack persistent identities. They share no context, so they just clash. To really grasp the danger here, you got to compare this to shadow IT. Like a forgotten software subscription just sitting idle on a company credit card. Agent sprawl is entirely different. While a forgotten subscription just sits there, an ungoverned AI agent continues to act. It's out there making decisions, spending money, and as we just saw, autonomously racking up massive liabilities without any human awareness.
We can think about it. If physical robotaxis aren't allowed on California roads without DMV-issued red license plates and strict geofencing, it seems insane that autonomous financial bots are just roaming the web entirely anonymously. If an agent goes rogue, there's no license plate to track. Don't we need a digital DMV?
And the report formalizes that exact concept through something called decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. DIDs. Got it. But importantly, this is not a centralized government database. A DID is tied to a blockchain ledger. So when an AI agent hits a server, it uses a private cryptographic key to, mathematically prove its identity and its behavioral history, without having to rely on a central authority like Google or Microsoft to vouch for them. To make this work, these identifiers utilize W3C verifiable credentials. Basically, think of these as digital passports. They prove the agent's purpose, security certifications, and compliance. And the agent absolutely must present these verified credentials, passing through what are essentially cryptographic toll booths before it can even interact with the web.
So let's walk through exactly how this works when an autonomous agent tries to access a corporate network. Step 1, an agent is spawned. Step 2, it hits an enterprise firewall. Step 3, it's forced to present its cryptographic key and credentials. Step 4, it pays a microtransaction, like a tiny toll fee. And then finally, Step 5, it gains access.
Now you might be wondering, I get the DMV analogy for physical roads, because there are cops, but the internet is open. If I build an open source autonomous agent in my basement, who's going to force my bot to use a DID, let alone pay a registration fee for it? Well, you don't have to police the basements. You just police the enterprise firewalls. Large platforms, banks, vendors, they simply will not accept traffic or API requests from an unidentified agent. It is just too much of a liability. They don't want another $2 million loop. So if your basement bot wants to book a flight or scrape data, it has to cryptographically sign that request. And to get that signature, it has to be registered. Enterprise cybersecurity essentially forces compliance organically.
It really does. And if every bot has to pay to register and authenticate, the scale of that revenue must be staggering. For a real-world proof of concept, just look at the Anguilla miracle. That tiny Caribbean island just happens to own the .ai internet domain. And because of the generative AI boom, domain sales just exploded.
I think that single registry is projected to generate roughly $85 million by 2025, which is funding an astonishing 47% of their entire national government budget. One digital registry generating nearly half the operating budget for a whole territory.
Which is wild. And they aren't just absorbing this into standard operational costs. This digital revenue is actively repaying national debt, expanding their international airport, investing in island-wide renewable energy grids, and funding free public health care for children and seniors. It is absolute proof that digital infrastructure can generate life-changing sovereign wealth.
But here's where it gets really interesting. What does this all mean for you listening right now? How does a government revenue stream from bot toll booths become a personal paycheck? Well, the structural template the report points to here is the Alaska Permanent Fund.
Since the 1980s, Alaska has operated on a very simple premise. Step 1, they tax finite oil extraction on state lands. Step 2, they invest those royalties into a massively diversified fund. And Step 3, they pay a yearly cash dividend to every eligible citizen. To put that in perspective, I think a family of 4 received over $4,400 back in 2021.
So applying this to our framework, instead of taxing finite, polluting oil, we tax the infinite, exponentially expanding resource of AI computation, because corporations have to pay these identity toll fees anyway to secure their networks.
This creates what experts call the computational resource dividend. The infrastructure itself becomes the revenue mechanism. Every single time a new AI agent is spawned or authenticates through a toll booth, it drops a fraction of a cent, a microtransaction, into a massive sovereign wealth pool,
which seamlessly funds a UBI. That completely flips the whole narrative. The terrifying exponential growth of AI doesn't have to mean absolute job displacement for you. If the registry framework is built right, the slop economy literally monetizes itself to fund human prosperity, paying rent to the humans it replaces.
It is a very optimistic take on what usually feels like a doomsday scenario. But there is a final provocative thought we haven't touched on yet. If this digital identity infrastructure is the new oil, what happens to global geopolitics when world superpowers begin racing to control these foundational AI registries? It becomes a completely new kind of geopolitical arms race, because whoever builds and standardizes the toll booths dictates the global economy. Definitely something for you to chew on as these bots get faster, smarter, and incredibly lucrative. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to explore how a massive corporate AI disaster might actually hold the key to funding a universal basic income paycheck directly for you. Let's just jump right into this. Right now, 2 AI bots belonging to a massive logistics firm are stuck in an automated loop, and it's a complete mess. Basically, one bot is optimizing for shipping speed and booking premium flights, while the other is trying to minimize fuel costs so it just immediately cancels those flights. They are out there clashing endlessly at machine speed. And by the time human engineers actually noticed what was going on, this completely uncoordinated bot battle had racked up a staggering $2 million in rebooking fees, which is just wild. I mean, that is the slop economy in action. But ironically, the massive liability of these autonomous agents might be the exact mechanism to fund a literal universal basic income for you, the listener. We're pulling from a really comprehensive new report today on architecting an identity framework for AI, and our mission is to explore how this digital chaos basically turns into cash. This whole situation perfectly illustrates that classic Jurassic Park critique of the tech industry, right? People are so busy noticing that they aren't stopping to ask if they should. Companies completely rush to scale AI compute power without building the architectural control planes required to actually manage it safely. So that $2 million loop, what's actually happening there? Well, it's a textbook symptom of what industry insiders call agent sprawl. We aren't dealing with passive chatbots anymore. They are actually out there doing things. We have these autonomous bots executing financial transactions anonymously, but they completely lack persistent identities. They share absolutely no context, so they just crash into each other. Section 1. Building a digital DMV. Because, think about it. If physical robotaxis aren't allowed on California roads without DMV-issued license plates and strict geofencing, it seems insane that autonomous financial bots are just roaming the web entirely anonymously. I mean, don't we need a digital DMV? The formal solution presented in the report is the W3C standard of decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. Now, DIDs, it's important to note, are not some centralized government database. A DID is tied to a blockchain ledger. So when an AI agent hits a server, it uses a private cryptographic key to mathematically prove its identity and its behavioral history. And it does this without having to rely on a central authority like Google or Microsoft to vouch for it. It basically acts as a cryptographic passport. Section 2, Forcing Organic Compliance. Now, you might be wondering, I get the DMV analogy for physical roads because there are cops, but the internet is open. If I build an open-source autonomous agent in my basement, who's going to force my bot to register for a DID, let alone pay for it? Well, you don't have to police the basements. You just police the enterprise firewalls. Large platforms, banks, vendors, they simply will not accept traffic from an unidentified agent. It's way too much of a liability. They don't want another $2 million loop. So if your basement bot wants to book a flight or scrape data, it has to cryptographically sign that request at a toll booth. And to get that signature, it has to be registered. Enterprise cybersecurity basically forces compliance organically. Section 3. The Anguilla Miracle. And if enterprise security forces every bot on the web to pay to register, I mean, the scale of that revenue is absolutely staggering. We actually already have a real-world prototype proving this. Just look at the miracle of the tiny Caribbean island of Anguilla. They struck digital gold simply by owning the .ai internet domain. After the generative AI boom kicked off in late 2022, domain registrations just surged to roughly 2,000 a day. It completely proves that foundational naming and registry infrastructure is incredibly lucrative. By 2025, that single domain registry generated an estimated $85 million. And get this, that astonishingly funds 47% of Anguilla's entire national budget, paying for healthcare and public debt reduction, which is just wild. Section 4. Funding Human Prosperity. This brings us to the ultimate payoff. How does a massive government AI registry revenue stream become a personal paycheck for you?
Well, the structural template the report points to is the Alaska Permanent Fund. But instead of taxing finite, polluting oil extraction, we tax the infinite, exponentially expanding resource of AI computation.
Alaska invests its oil royalties and pays a yearly cash dividend to citizens. To put that into perspective, for a family of 4, that was over $4,400 back in 2021. Applying this exact model, because corporations have to pay these identity toll fees anyway to secure their networks, the infrastructure itself becomes the revenue mechanism. Every single time a new AI agent spawns or authenticates through a firewall's toll booth, it drops a microtransaction into a massive sovereign wealth pool that seamlessly funds a universal basic income.
Which completely flips the whole narrative. You know, the terrifying exponential growth of AI doesn't have to mean absolute job displacement. If we build the digital infrastructure right, autonomous agents are essentially forced to pay rent to the humans they displace. The slop economy literally monetizes itself to fund human prosperity.
It is a very optimistic take on what usually feels like a doomsday scenario. But there is a final provocative thought we haven't touched on yet. If this digital identity infrastructure is the new oil, what happens to global geopolitics when world superpowers begin racing to control these foundational AI registries? It becomes a completely new kind of geopolitical arms race. Whoever builds and standardizes the toll booths dictates this multi-trillion-dollar global economy. Definitely something for you to chew on as these bots get faster, smarter, and incredibly lucrative. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. I'll see you next time.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a structural postmortem of the recent $1 trillion AI investment cycle. We're going to cut through the hype and examine a very specific systems architecture concept, treating AI agent identity as public internet infrastructure. Let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the AI slop economics, then look at the governance layer error, cryptographic agent identity primitives, namespace sovereign funding models, Anguilla as the empirical proof, and finally, operational systems versus speculation.
Section 1. The AI slop economics and the problem of infinite supply.
Think about the macroeconomic reality we're living in right now. The core economic inevitability really boils down to this. If you drastically increase the supply of something that no one ever wanted in the first place, its value actually goes negative. When the market gets flooded with infinite untagged synthetic output, when supply basically shoots toward infinity with zero cost, the marginal value drops below zero. It literally becomes junk. So we're looking at a pretty stark contrast here. On one side, you've got roughly $1 trillion in AI capital expenditure, and on the other, a massive supply glut of negative value output. We're talking about unverified, one-click research, reductive social media spam, and reinvented apps that literally nobody asked for. The fundamental critique here borrows a bit from Jurassic Park. The industry got so utterly obsessed with whether it could build these endless generation machines that it completely skipped over whether it should.
Section 2. The governance layer error.
Current AI safety measures, they operate almost entirely at the application layer. Think prompt filters, content moderation, and RLHF. That's reinforcement learning from human feedback. But mathematically speaking, this approach is fundamentally flawed. Trying to police an effectively infinite output space at the user consumption level is just an engineering nightmare. The proposed structural fix is to move governance way down the stack to the infrastructure layer, specifically the DNS and registry root, utilizing finite network routing bottlenecks. Think of it as a systems engineering problem. Trying to police infinite AI prompt outputs at the application layer is exactly like trying to regulate traffic by standing on a street corner and shouting at individual speeding cars as they zoom by. It's impossible. It structurally cannot scale. True systemic control means setting the rules of the road before the vehicle even gets access to the highway.
Section 3. Cryptographic agent identity primitives.
If autonomous systems are going to interact with public internet infrastructure at a scale of trillions, they need verifiable identity credentials. Think of these agent primitives as digital rules of the road. You need a passport for basic identification, you need a license for network authorization, and you need plates, tags, or keys for strict accountability. The ultimate goal here is an accountability chain that links every single agent back to our responsible human or organization. This exact credential gating process basically functions as a cryptographic toll booth. Step 1, an agent requests network routing or an API call. Step 2, a W3C verifiable credential is cryptographically checked against a secure namespace registry event right at the DNS root. And step 3, if it's valid, the packet gets authenticated. But if the agent lacks that credential,
The packet is automatically dropped at the firewall. Without a valid digital license plate, the agent can't route packets, it can't hold a crypto wallet, and it can't transact. It is mathematically denied the raw connectivity it needs to scale. Section 4, Namespace Sovereign Funding Models.
Now, let's look at the macroeconomic upside of enforcing these identity primitives. There's a super compelling structural comparison to be made here. Think about the Alaska Permanent Fund. It capitalizes on a finite, extractive, and depleting physical resource, oil, to pay its citizens a dividend. The proposed agent identity namespace model functions exactly the same way structurally, but with one massive difference. It capitalizes on an exponentially expanding, renewable, non-extractive digital resource. As the volume of AI agents scales toward infinity, the sovereign resource base grows right along with it.
The actual financial pathway works like this. Step 1, an autonomous agent registers, which triggers a micro-remittance or registry fee. Step 2, those infrastructure fees are routed directly into a sovereign wealth fund. And step 3, that fund issues automated civil dividends, functioning as a public baseline survival dividend, essentially a UBI. Under this model, the massive overproduction of AI agents is actually told at the infrastructure layer to literally fund humanity.
Section 5, Anguilla as the empirical proof. We're moving from theoretical models to hard, empirically verified data here, because the evidence for this model is already operational today. Approximately 47% of Anguilla's total government revenue in 2025 is projected to come directly from the .ai domain registry. And it's really important to note, this is a measure of government revenue share, not gross domestic product, which is a super common miscalculation people make when discussing sovereign funding. Looking at the trend line, independent IMF data from 2023 logged roughly $32 million in revenue, which was about 20% of their government revenue at the time. By 2025, Anguilla government statements indicate that figure has scaled to about 47%. It's also worth noting that the registry is currently operated by Identity Digital. So this isn't just theory, it represents a proven working prototype of converting a digital namespace into real sovereign revenue.
Finally, Section 6, Operational Systems versus Speculation.
Let's cleanly separate what's real from what isn't. On the proven, operational side, we have the Anguilla.ai revenue mechanism, plus the reality of commercial registry operators like Identity Digital successfully managing these namespaces today. However, on the speculative and unbuilt side, the entire concept of trillion-scale accountability chains remains totally unverified. Furthermore, the cross-jurisdiction enforcement of these credentials on a borderless internet is highly speculative. While the DNS toll booth concept is absolutely technically feasible, seamless global enforcement is completely unproven. Which leaves us with one final structural question to close out this explainer. If infrastructure truly is destiny, and we actually move AI governance down to the registry layer, who sets the fees? And who controls the root of this completely borderless agent economy? Does this actually solve the Slop apocalypse, or does it risk a massive centralization of power, handing a global digital toll booth over to a single authority? It's a critical systemic risk, and definitely something you should be thinking about. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack all this today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Hey everyone, let's dive into how we turn total AI chaos into a massive global economic engine. Tech giants have literally poured over $1 trillion into AI compute, but the results? A total mess. It's just like Jurassic Park, we focused on if we could build AI, ignoring the infrastructure to govern it. Now we're facing a literal slopocalypse, just endless negative value, synthetic junk data totally flooding the internet. You can't just fix this with basic chat filters. We have to rebuild at the core infrastructure layer. Think about it. If autonomous cyber taxis need physical license plates, trillions of AI agents need cryptographic passports. We basically need a worldwide AI DMV to issue digital passports and verifiable credentials. This creates a strict cryptographic toll booth. Any network packets from unverified agents instantly dropped. So how does this generate wealth? We charge micro fees for identity validation, creating a massive continuous revenue stream. Believe it or not, a super lucrative working prototype for this exact sovereign wealth model already exists today. The island of Anguilla funds almost half of its government revenue purely by selling .ai domains. That's projected to hit up to $93 million in 2025 alone. Digital namespaces are incredibly lucrative. By cutting out private middlemen, governments can route these massive registry fees straight into their state treasuries. But here's the real kicker. How do we turn this unprecedented wealth into universal basic income for citizens? Agents are already making millions of transactions. When that hits trillions, namespace registration fees become absolutely astronomical.
We just capture those giant registration fees in public wealth funds to pay out direct cash dividends.
It's exactly like the Alaskan oil dividend, but instead of finite physical oil, we're taxing infinite digital namespaces.
And data from Macau and open research proves that direct cash transfers significantly boost recipient savings and education.
This isn't sci-fi. Cryptographic trust layers are operational today, already holding thousands of agents accountable. Because infrastructure is destiny, we absolutely need a worldwide DMV for AI before we build another chatbot.
So it's up to us. Does the slop apocalypse ruin the internet, or do we regulate it to fund humanity? Let's dive right into today's explainer on how absolute digital chaos could basically turn into a paycheck for you. Right now, 2 AI bots at a massive logistics firm are stuck in a $2 million loop. One bot is relentlessly booking premium flights for speed, while the other just instantly cancels them to save fuel. It's a total mess. Industry insiders actually call this exact kind of slop economy disaster agent sprawl. We've got autonomous bots executing transactions at machine speed, but they share zero context and lack persistent identities. If physical robo-taxis need DMV license plates, why on earth are financial bots roaming the web completely anonymously? Well, this report formalizes a digital DMV to fix that, using things called decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. These aren't central corporate databases. They're tied to blockchain ledgers, using cryptographic keys to mathematically prove an agent's history.
But hey, the internet is open, right? Who forces some random basement-built bot to actually use a DID?
Simple. You don't police the basements at all. You just police the enterprise firewalls instead.
These bots now have to pass through cryptographic toll booths before they can even interact with the web.
Large platforms will just drop unauthenticated API traffic entirely to avoid massive liabilities like that $2 million loop. So if every single bot has to pay a registration fee, the scale of that revenue becomes staggering. Just look at the Anguilla miracle. That tiny island just happens to own the .ai internet domain. Because of the AI boom, that single registry is projected to generate over $85 million by 2025. That's funding almost half their entire national budget. But how does this government revenue become your personal paycheck?
Well, the structural template here is the Alaska Permanent Fund, which taxes oil extraction to pay citizens cash dividends.
Only instead of taxing finite oil, we tax the infinite, exponentially expanding resource of AI computation.
Corporations have to secure their networks anyway, so every authentication drops a microtransaction into a sovereign wealth pool. The infrastructure itself becomes the revenue mechanism.
This could seamlessly fund a literal universal basic income for you.
It completely flips the narrative. The terrifying growth of AI basically monetizes itself to fund human prosperity. But here's a thought. What happens to global geopolitics when superpowers race to control these foundational AI registries? It sparks a completely new arms race. Whoever builds and standardizes these toll booths dictates the global economy. Definitely something for you to chew on as these autonomous bots get faster, smarter, and incredibly lucrative. Welcome back. Today, we're tackling the trillion-dollar AI failure called the slop apocalypse and how to actually fix it. It's the classic Jurassic Park problem, right? Tech built endless AI slop without ever asking if they should. A literal $1 trillion poured in, and we got unrequested apps, synthetic spam, and absolutely zero accountability. The core issue? Trillions of autonomous agents are just churning out this negative value slop completely anonymously. To stop this chaos, AI doesn't need another chatbot. It desperately needs a worldwide DMV. Think about it. Like cars, these agents need verifiable passports, digital license plates, and actual rules of the road. Under the hood, decentralized identifiers act as global passports, and verifiable credentials work just like digital license plates. And don't worry about privacy. These contain zero personal data, just verifiable cryptographic keys to keep things secure. This exact infrastructure lets us instantly revoke bad actors, track audit trails, and manage high-risk authorizations safely. Now, here's the brilliant part. A global agent registry actually creates an unstoppable economic toll booth. Imagine the Alaska Permanent Fund. But instead of finite oil, it's fueled by a totally renewable digital namespace.
Tiny micro remittances from agent registration fees could actually seed a massive public dividend fund for real people. We already see this working right now in Anguilla, proving this sovereign digital resource model totally works. Conservative IMF data shows that in 2023, Anguilla generated a staggering $32 million just from .ai registrations. That single digital asset literally made up over 20% of their entire government revenue that year. Crazy. And that cash directly funded real civic infrastructure, like airport expansions, road development, and even senior healthcare. So look, the goal isn't just goring tech compliance. It's about forcing the machine economy to finally pay rent. People are definitely catching on. Skeptics want real civic infrastructure and accountability, not just more useless apps. So I'll leave you with this thought. Isn't it about time the slop apocalypse paid a rent dividend to humanity? Welcome to The Explainer. Right now, 2 AI logistics bots are stuck in a massive, expensive automated loop. Before humans even noticed, they racked up $2 million in fees. Talk about the slop economy in action. One bot booked premium flights for shipping speed, while the other immediately canceled them to minimize fuel costs. This is textbook agent sprawl. We aren't dealing with passive chatbots anymore. This is completely unchecked digital chaos. These autonomous bots execute financial transactions at machine speed, but without persistent identities or shared context, they violently clash. Physical robotaxis need strict DMV plates and geofences. So why are autonomous financial bots roaming the web completely anonymously? To fix this massive liability, don't we desperately need a digital DMV for these autonomous agents? The new report answers this with DIDs, or decentralized identifiers. Think of it as a cryptographic passport for AI. Tied to a blockchain ledger, an agent uses a private cryptographic key to mathematically prove its identity to servers. But hey, if you build an open source bot in your basement, who actually forces you to use this DID? You don't police the basement developers, you police the enterprise firewalls where these bots actually try to interact. Large platforms and banks absolutely will not accept traffic from unidentified agents. They don't want another $2 million loop. If every bot registers, the revenue is staggering. Anguilla's .ai domains currently fund 47% of their national budget. That single registry is projected to generate a mind-blowing $85 million by 2025. So, what does this mean for you? How does this massive government revenue stream become your literal personal paycheck? The blueprint here is the Alaska Permanent Fund. They tax finite oil, invest it, and pay citizens cash dividends. Just to put that into perspective, back in 2021, a family of 4 received over $4,400. Now, instead of polluting oil, we tax the infinitely expanding resource of AI computation to seamlessly fund universal basic income. Exponential AI growth doesn't have to mean joblessness. The slop economy can literally monetize itself to fund human prosperity. It's an optimistic take, for sure. But here's a final, highly provocative thought. Who controls this new digital oil? Whoever builds and standardizes these cryptographic toll booths dictates the global economy. Welcome to a completely new geopolitical arms race. Welcome to This Explainer. Let's see how we can turn AI's digital trash into a universal basic income. Billionaires just dumped $1 trillion into AI. But honestly, what do we really have to show for it? Like Dr. Ian Malcolm said, are tech giants building AI tools humanity actually needs, or just showing off? Instead of utopia, we got a slop apocalypse. That's an absolute avalanche of AI-generated junk producing negative value. We're drowning in useless stuff, reductive summaries, hallucinated research, and endless automated spam. Literally, nobody asked for this. It's basic economics, right? Flood the market with a massive supply of unwanted content and value plummets below zero. Unlike strictly regulated self-driving cars, autonomous AI agents currently roam the internet completely unchecked and totally anonymous. So, what's the fix? A global identity management platform to govern these digital entities and actually hold them accountable. We should treat AI agents like highway traffic. They need registered digital passports and identifiable license plates to operate. Here's the genius part. Charging registry fees for these digital passports creates a massive, continuous public revenue stream. Think of Alaska's oil wealth fund, but for tech. We use this digital revenue to fund a universal basic income. We already have a working prototype. The tiny island of Anguilla actually funds its government through .ai domain sales. Astoundingly, those domain sales alone make up 16% of their entire GDP. It's literal free money. As trillions of new AI agents expand online, they'll all urgently need to pay up for these digital passports.
So, the ultimate question, do we let the AI slopaholics completely bury us or make it pay rent?
Let's test a bold claim. Sustainable AI absolutely requires identity infrastructure built right at the DNS root layer. Goldman Sachs estimates over $1 trillion in AI capital spending so far. The returns? Largely unverified. This massive spend has flooded the market with low-utility slop. Basically, marginal value has turned negative.
The industry obsessed over scaling massive models, completely ignoring the structural need for verifiable trust routing.
Current governance relies on app layer prompt filters. That's literally like trying to regulate traffic by shouting at speeding cars. To actually scale and fix this vulnerability, we have to move governance down to the registry layer.
Secure infrastructure demands a 3-layer architecture that operates strictly below the agent's process boundary. This needs 3 system-level primitives to enforce strict, unbypassable cryptographic accountability across the entire network.
By using eBPF kernel-level enforcement, any unauthorized agent packet gets systematically blocked right at the socket level.
So, how does this pay off? Registry namespace fees could actually fund a sovereign wealth citizen dividend.
The closest proven precedent is the Alaska Permanent Fund, paying citizens directly from state mineral royalties. But here's the kicker. Alaska uses finite oil. The AI namespace is an expanding, renewable, non-extractive resource. For hard empirical proof, just look at Anguilla's .ai registry, operated by Identity Digital since January 2025. Back in 2023, the IMF independently logged roughly $32 million in revenue for Anguilla. And Anguilla explicitly states this will make up roughly 47% of their entire government revenue in 2025. But let's steelman the counter-argument. The huge surveillance risk here is whoever controls the root controls the agents. We need to ruthlessly separate proven operational systems from pure speculation to see if this actually works.
The Anguilla revenue model and Layer 3 eBPF detection, those are operationally proven and fully verifiable right now.
Trillion-scale deployment and cross-jurisdictional enforcement, though, those remain totally unverified and highly speculative at this point.
So, does this infrastructure actually fix the trillion-dollar deficit, or is it just another disguised token land grab?
Okay, let's look at the trillion-dollar AI slopocalypse and the infrastructure solution meant to fix it. Here's the plan. We'll break down why current AI governance fails and explore a structural alternative. Roughly $1 trillion went into AI, right? But it mostly produced negative value content, or slop. It's the classic Jurassic Park problem. The industry focused on if they could, ignoring if they should. Economics 101, folks. Flooding the market with unverified, automated junk literally pushes its marginal value negative.
Now, application layer fixes like prompt filters, they totally fail to police an infinite output space.
Seriously, filtering prompts is like standing on a corner shouting at speeding cars to fix highway safety.
The alternative? Move governance down to infrastructure. Require agents to have verifiable digital passports and license plates.
No credentials? Then the agent can't route, transact, or use APIs. It's a hard cryptographic toll booth.
This builds a self-sustaining model. Registry fees pool into a sovereign wealth fund, paying dividends to citizens. Unlike the Alaska Permanent Fund's finite oil, agent identity taps into an exponentially expanding digital namespace.
Need empirical proof? Just look at Anguilla's .ai domain registry. The revenue growth is wild.
Crucially, the IMF logged this as government revenue, not GDP. It's a vital economic distinction to make. But valid objections exist. Think surveillance risks, registry capture, and enforcing this across a borderless internet. So we have to separate operational facts, like Anguilla's revenue, from speculative, unbuilt global designs.
Ultimately, do we enforce infrastructure accountability or just let ourselves drown in negative value AI slop?